I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is public comments. I'm going to read a little bit from the policy that we have. First of all, the public library is founded on the First Amendment, which is freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. That's what we're doing here today. The Community Library Network Board of Trustees also operates under the Idaho Code open meeting law. The board will be pleased to take comments under advisement, but will not be responding to them at the meeting. Public comment will be addressed at the next regularly scheduled board meeting. Comments may be submitted by writing or oral presentation or both. And the board is committed to conducting its meetings in a civil, orderly, efficient, and productive manner. The most important things that I want us all to remember today are to be respectful of one another and to be civil to one another. We may not like what someone is saying, but we all need to listen and let them say it. Without interruption. I go down and read a few more, and I will be probably redundant of a few more things that come from our policy. No personal attacks on other members of the public, library staff, or board members. And as chair, I will either terminate or redirect a presentation that is not adhering to this. I think that's all. We would like you to please state your name and the community that you come from so that we can, since our library district is made up of many communities, that's helpful for us to know that. Right, at the close of public comment, you're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of our meeting. There are agendas on the table, is that right? Agendas on the table. We have the minutes of our meetings on our website. All right. So our first person for public comment is Marianne from RAC.
Does that mean it's on?
Yes.
Good afternoon. It's well established that the Community Library Network is all in on the American Library Association and their propaganda. Tax dollars funding CLN are used for ALA membership so that CLN will wholesale uptake and spew what the ALA pushes. September's Banned Book Week is a quintessential example, particularly the corrosive materials and parental subversion that CLN and the ALA are promoting. Even according, in fact, these are only books that have been challenged, not banned. So despite that disingenuous theme, this photo shows an enormous display from the Hayden's Children's section proclaiming Banned Book Week with a scavenger hunt leading to challenge books, including rewards to kids for finding them. Reminiscent of Snow White's witch's alluring but poisonous apple. Also within Hayden's juvenile section is this sign, which encourages children to keep secret from their parents what they're reading. Let the record show that CLN, the majority of this board, the library director, Amy Rhoda, and the library staff endorsed the subversion of parents. Additional displays were included on the shelves, listing the reasons for book challenges such as this in Spirit Lake for the book 13 Reasons Why. Despite Spirit Lake's limited space, this book was pulled out of the shelf and featured facing forward twice on 2 different shelves. A teen book that includes, according to the tag, drugs, teen drunkenness, and smoking, sexually explicit descriptions, rape, and is centered on teen suicide. And kids are enticed to read this book with the helpful shelf tag. In case Spirit Lake kids missed out on this book on one shelf, here's the additional shelf on which the same book is featured. Also included on that shelf is Looking for Alaska, yet another book centering on teen suicide, which CLN owns 9 copies of. Looking for Alaska earned a spot on the American Library Association's list of top 10 frequently challenged books for 2012 because of its, quote, offensive language, sexually explicit, and unsuited for age group, quote, unquote, label. It describes young teens watching pornography, excessive smoking and drinking, 197 obscenities, and a 16-year-old who kills herself. With the ever-increasing crisis in adolescent mental health, it's unconscionable that glamorizing teen suicide is being shoved at our community's kids. To investigate these books, I had to check them out, which will be interpreted in your metrics as demand. Don't delude yourselves. I let the record show that I checked them out in protest, and I'm not alone. I had created a list of 600 plus of these types of titles for kids and teens owned by CDA and CLN libraries. In doing so, I've noticed more and more copies of these materials are listed as long overdue or lost. So does Kootenai County have an abundance of irresponsible kids or parents, or are parents and concerned citizens taking matters into their own hands? I submit it's the latter, and we will not stop.
Thank you. The next person is Heather Greenman. What community are you from? I guess it wasn't listed here.
Oh, Post Falls.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's okay.
So a lot of the what I hear about this banned books thing, and the reason the library has not removed pornographic material from children's section, which is, as what I understand has been said, as young as 12 years old. And even some of these gender identity books and stuff like that is because the library cites the First Amendment. So I think it would be good for us to understand what our Constitution is and the foundations of our Constitution. Even our least religious, one of the least religious founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, was one of the ones who funded church on Capitol grounds and attended church on Sundays. And when he was asked why he attends church, his response was, and this is not a direct quote, but basically that because as the president, it is his job to influence the American citizens with morality. It has been said by our founding fathers that if we do not have morality, that our country as we know it, our Constitution, will not stand. So we get freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the exercise thereof. These things are constitutional foundations, but we do have a foundation upon which that is built, and that is morality. And whether people like it or not, it is biblical morality. And so when we look at, okay, well, how far does one person's freedom go and where does the other person's freedom end? We are supposed to look back at that foundation. But another easy thing to look at when we're thinking about that foundation and where those freedoms end for one person and the other is simply does it affect or hurt the other person? Certainly exposing children to pornographic materials before their minds are fully formed, before they're 18 years of age, which is what our Constitution recognizes is an adult and they have the legal right to vote then. There are other things too, like what, 21 years old? That's when you're legally allowed to drink. When are you legally allowed to buy cigarettes? There are things we recognize as a society that young people are not able to do on their own until they have become the age of which they are actually an adult. So when we are exposing children to pornographic material, things such as this, certainly common sense tells us that that is harmful to them. I read a statistic recently that said that not just drug addiction, but one of the biggest addictions and worse than hard drugs is sexual addiction, pornography. So I would.
Okay, your time is up.
Absolutely. So I would encourage the library to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tierney.
Suzanne Karin, I'm in Post Falls. I'm here today to talk about the children's sections in our library system. I speak as a parent, educator, and bachelor's degree holder in psychology from Stanford University. Because I've studied how the human mind learns and processes stimuli, I'm forced to conclude that librarians are intentionally influencing our children toward left-leaning ideologies in a disproportionate manner. Specifically, I want to speak about the books that are consistently and prominently displayed and or given out to kids. As a weekly patron of the CLN, I have observed that the librarians set out certain children's books at eye level or on tables. Setting the books apart makes them psychologically more appealing to kids, which I assume is on purpose. My assessment of these choices is that they are consistently promoting progressive political ideologies with no balance in alternative books of conservative nature. Among the choices I have seen were books about or by left-leaning personalities such as Sonia Sotomayor, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Megan Rapinoe, Hillary Clinton, Jill Biden, and Stacey Abrams. Books promoting LGBTQ ideology. Books numerically overrepresented and hyper-focused on race. Books promoting liberal propaganda, such as one called Woke Baby, and another one called Fake News, which taught children that Fox News lies and CNN always tells the truth. Books supporting Black Lives Matter, which is an openly Marxist political organization, and the 1619 Project, which is a politically motivated revisionist version of American history. Books promoting vaccines, particularly two which specifically stated that the COVID-19 vaccine confers immunity and prevents transmission, claims admittedly denied by the CDC. The book on the giveaway rack offered to 12-plus-year-olds, which said on the cover, quote, "I kissed my best friend's boyfriend, mission, do it again," end quote. This clearly promotes that can lead to adultery later in life, and I asked it to be removed, but it was later placed back on the giveaway shelf. I have heard multiple times that the library, quote, "does not censor materials," but I do feel that conservative books are being passively censored by default. Where are the featured books by or about Martin Luther King Jr., Thomas Sowell, Ben Carson, Clarence Thomas, or Condoleezza Rice? Where are the books on the traditional family, natural health, sexual purity, and religious values? In your eagerness to promote freedom of speech, you proudly displayed a banned books table full of leftist titles, but absent of the most banned book of all time, the Bible. I am not here to judge the moral value of these materials or request them to be censored. I'm not asking the library to stop displaying books with progressive ideologies, mainly because I know that will never happen. What I am asking for the library to do is to be fair and balanced in the books they display. If you are going to politicize our children, please present both sides of the political aisle.
Kara Claridge.
We have a theme today. So at the last meeting I attended in August, there was a concern raised by the director about misinformation. And it was clearly stated that the Hips on the Drag Queen was owned by Coeur d'Alene Library, not the CLN. This was housed under the pretense that the CLN can only be accountable for their own collection. Aside from the fact that any book can be found from any library, I'll go with that sentiment of responsibility. So to a parent trying to figure this out, it appears that the line is drawn at books about drag dancing. Although at a city park, I guess it's fine to endorse it. But to illustrate my continued disbelief at what is now offered, I pulled these books from Post Falls here. Okay, so we have Bunny Bear, age range 4 through 8, a book about a bear who feels like a bunny on the inside. This particular book aims to deceive children by destroying the boundary between pretend and reality, by telling them they can be something they are not, merely by claiming it, then having everyone else accept them. Jack, not Jack me. Read this one last night. I'm marketed to preschool through first graders. It's a sad story about an older sister who watches her baby sister display tomboy qualities and then be affirmed as a boy. Disgusting and sad. Snapdragon, a story about a young girl who befriends a witch and discovers that.
I'm sorry, can you please not throw the books on the floor?
A graphic novel, which is just disgusting on every level. It's got witchcraft, it's got weird drawings. I can see my 12-year-old picking this up. It's just disgusting. Why is this in the children's library? Okay, so these books are out of order. There's no comparison to Judy Blume in that time of life. This is a whole nother ball game. And I haven't really even scratched the surface, but these books, they should be shelved somewhere else, not in the children's section. I'm focusing on the transgender issue today because I want to just highlight that it appears like you're purchasing and promoting these books at an impressive rate. So I think the misinformation is that you tell us the library is a safe place for kids and it's not. So you know who's coming out now? It's the young adults who have been told by trusted adults that they can change their gender. And their bodies have been mutilated in this process. They're the ones coming out saying, don't do this. These books are destructive to children. And it's confusing. And why would we put children in a confusing place on purpose? So your part in fixing this mess is to stop purchasing more of this and move what you do have to the adult section. It's woke ideology. It's a religion. Of course, it's shrouded in a moral argument, but it's perverse ideology. And I say stop attacking my family by allowing this stuff to come in. It's been a year and I haven't seen a lot of change, and I want some change.
Thank you. And I can't read the person's last name, but it's Barbara, is it Nygaard?
Hi, my name is Barbara Nygaard and I live in Post Falls. I'm the founder and CEO of a technology and research firm with over 30 years experience and customers across federal agencies, cities, and counties across the nation. I'm here today as a concerned grandmother and a strong proponent of the First Amendment and libraries in general. But your burning desire to expose our children to sexual material and the division that it creates is not in the best interests of our children or our communities and has crossed a line. The sexualization of our children is exploding nationwide, and I would like to help ensure that this community is doing all they can to do what the Supreme Court stated in 1982, that the government has a compelling interest in safeguarding the physical and psychological well-being of minors. As recipients of our tax dollars, you have an inherent responsibility and duty to do that. There's much debate also about the First Amendment and what is provided to our children to read or see and hear in this community. But there is no debate when it comes to child pornography and obscenity, neither of which is protected by the First Amendment. As Justice Scalia also stated, it debases the most defenseless of our citizens. In addition, I'd like to address today a couple of other issues I found when reviewing your revised policies and your strategic plan. You state on your website that there are no sexually explicit content in your libraries in the children's section, but there may be themes in some children's materials that parents may prefer to discuss and address with their children first. Well, which books are they? Where are they? How can parents prevent their children from accessing these materials if you don't tell us where they are? This information must be easily accessed, and if you've already addressed this, great job, please let me know. You also state the responsibility for use of library materials by minors rests ultimately with their parents or legal guardians. I agree. My question, though, is what policies and safeguards do you all have in place to prevent minors from accessing these materials as they roam around a library without a parent? My final question to you today is that your strategic plan mentions a community and staff survey. It was conducted and which helped form your policies, apparently. And unfortunately, I couldn't find any access to that survey, which should be available to all in an easy to find location. I'd like to request a copy of that survey and the results of that survey, since it informed your decisions about how to proceed. I do hope these points I raised today will at least give you some pause in the discussion as to the path you have chosen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, that is the end of our public comment today. Everybody's welcome to stay to listen to the rest of our meetings. So the next item on our agenda is our youth services. Karin, Yother? Our youth services library annual report. It'll be behind us. Okay. You don't need us to introduce ourselves. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I know it's probably.
Good afternoon. I'm Karin Yother. I'm the Youth Services Coordinator for the Community Library Network, and I'm happy to be with you today to provide an update on youth services programs and initiatives. Today, I'm going to introduce our youth services staff and our team, review our annual statistics for you, discuss some of our projects and initiatives, and highlight a few of our key partnerships. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the youth services team. Beginning in the upper left-hand corner, we have Miss Bethany, who is our youth services specialist at the Apple Library. We have Miss Lauren and Mr. Tim, who work at Hayden. Mr. Tim did leave us in August to do ASL interpretation at a local school district, but was significant to all of our programming this year, so I wanted to include him. We have Miss Megan, who's our youth services programming specialist, who works out of the Hayden office. We have Miss Denise, who is our teen programming specialist for the district. We have Miss Katie, there in that picture with two people, the person on the left, and she is our programming specialist here at Post Falls. With her is Miss Kathy, who is our new programming specialist in Rathdrum. In the bottom, we have Miss Megan, who is our programming specialist at the Spirit Lake Library. We have Miss Jamie, who is our wonderful programming specialist up in the Pinehurst Library. We have Miss Amanda with Pigeon in the background, and she is our homeschool specialist. And she wanted me to point out to you that her necklace, by the way, is a genome sequence for the Microplasma alligatoris, a flesh-eating microbe that preys on alligators. It's one of the activities that she does with the homeschool kids when they did study genomes. So she wanted me to make sure I pointed that out. And then Miss Kelsey, who is our outreach specialist for the district. It is also my pleasure to introduce our two newest team members who joined us both within the last 2 weeks. We have Miss Laura, who is down at our Harrison Library, and Jay, who joins us here at Post Falls. Share with you some of the ways the youth services team fulfills our mission. We empower discovery through unique programming, dynamic services, and community engagement. To get us started today, I'd like to share with you our year in numbers. So this year, our 12 amazingly talented youth services specialists served over 49,000 children and teens at library programs and outreach events. We saw over 10,000 school-aged children and nearly 7,700 early learners at outreach programs alone. You will see that we held 1,603 programs this year. 691 of those programs were for our babies, toddlers, and preschoolers, which is ages birth to 4. Our kids, we had 604 programs, which is kids ages 5 to 10. We had 243 teen programs and 65 programs in the other category, which is library services and community events. This chart shows the number of children and teens served at those in-house and outreach programs. So just to give you perspective, we served nearly 20,000 babies, toddlers, and preschoolers, 24,000 kids, and 4,000 teens. And there was just under 21,000 through library service and community events. And the orange bar, which is outreach, community events is one of those when we're at Hayden Days, Apple Days, and other large community events where we have an opportunity to engage with a larger section of the population. The first initiative that I want to share with you today is our Launch into Learning program. The Launch into Learning began as a grant from the Idaho Commission for Libraries in the fall of 2019 with the goal of reaching 4-year-olds and a caregiver with the tools to help prepare students for kindergarten. We developed the Launch into Learning activity guide with our partners at United Way and created 1,500 backpacks to distribute throughout our service area. Working with our schools and other community organizations that serve our target audience, we distributed backpacks even when most everything was closed during the pandemic. We received a second grant in 2021 to continue this project and again worked with our partners at United Way to distribute another 1,500 backpacks. This Launch into Learning project has expanded to our Full Steam Ahead collection, providing materials for families who are unable to provide them for themselves. We've also received another grant from TDS Fiber to continue the project for next year. This summer, we received an educational stipend from United Way to expand the Launch into Learning project to include components in our story times, offer caregiver workshops, and host kindergarten readiness events. These programs will be rolled out over the coming months. So why play? There is significant research around the importance of play for early learners and children, even play for adults and our senior citizens. We incorporate play and play-related skills into programs to help children develop narrative skills, fine and gross motor skills, problem-solving skills, and even social and emotional skills. Social and emotional skills for babies through our preschoolers looks like learning to interact with other children, sharing, give and take, playing well with others. It's also part of the growth mindset concept that Nick Madsen spoke with you about recently at his board report. Helping children navigate roadblocks. I'm sorry. You're close. Okay. Helping children navigate roadblocks to success. For example, their tower fell down. The glue cap is stuck. There's no more purple blocks. They can't find what they're looking for, and they don't know how to articulate what they want to do, are all examples of social emotional learning and opportunities to build their growth mindset from an early age. Another example of using play is blocks. Block play is used as a tool for learning to read. We begin with shape recognition and understanding. Shapes become letters. Letters become sounds. Sounds become words. Words become sentences. Reading. I can turn. Sensory storytime is designed for children with autism and sensory processing disorders. Sensory storytime differs from our traditional storytime in a variety of ways. We use picture scheduling to manage transitions. We have fidget toys available to enhance focus and calm. We have 1 or 2 reciprocal activities to foster social interaction between children. And there's a flexible approach which allows for sensory seekers to roam in the room. We have wobble chairs to provide seating options for a variety of needs, and we limit the program to no more than 8 children per session plus their caregivers. Perceptual, fine motor, and process skills development are a natural result of exploration with age-appropriate toys and sensory materials, and sensory storytime is a perfect way to offer this development to our special needs community. In recent years, we began to see an increase in the number of families homeschooling their children. Last year, we were able to hire Ms. Amanda as our homeschool specialist to fill that growing need in our community. Amanda posted a homeschool survey on our website, which is still up there now, to identify service needs for this community and help guide our program development. Amanda creates and hosts monthly programs at each of our libraries and weekly at Post Falls and Hayden. Each program has a science or STEAM concept and includes topics such as the science of squish, the science of spin, and most recently, Space Camp, where kids got to experience a life-size gyroscope. This program gives Amanda and other YS staff the opportunity to connect with homeschool families and share the multitude of resources we have available through the library to assist with their learning. Last initiative I'd like to share today is the I Am Teen Wellness Initiative. IAM launched in 2019 with a grant from the National Network of Libraries of Medicine, with the goal of providing monthly programs for teens centered around health and wellness activities. Programs include nature hikes at Rathdrum Mountain and Farragut State Park, make your own fidgets, teen laundry day, essential oils, and coming later this fall, programs on mindfulness. Through a grant from the Idaho Community Foundation and the Inovia Foundation, we are creating mindfulness kits with items such as journals, eye masks, stress balls, fidget rings, coloring books, and information about library programs and materials to support health and wellness. This initiative and these programs are designed to be one more tool in their toolbox and demonstrate the resources available at their local libraries. Partnerships and collaboration are key to the work of the Youth Services Department. Karin, Denise, Kelsey, and I had the opportunity to present at the Building Bridges Renewing Community Tri-Conference in Missoula and the Idaho Library Association Growing Libraries Connecting Communities Conference in Lewiston. Our presentation, Community Partnerships, Making Connections to Enhance Library Programming, provided an overview of 25 of our partnerships and programs that have had an impact on our communities. We appreciated the opportunity to share with the greater library community and help build bridges to strengthen all of our communities. One of the partnerships that I want to talk about today is Second Harvest. During the pandemic, we identified a growing need around food insecurity in our community, and Kelsey reached out to Second Harvest and a partnership was formed. Second Harvest is a national organization but has a mobile market based out of Spokane. This program is fairly simple. We provide a parking lot and some volunteers, and they bring everything else. Digging even further into our community, we identify volunteers to help with those markets, which includes providing volunteers to distribute that food. No information is needed to access the program or verify need, and everybody is welcome. While providing food may be outside of the typical scope of library services, we are here to meet community needs, and we know that families may be struggling to meet those needs. And children that are hungry or dealing with food insecurity are not able to focus on learning, fall behind in school, and rarely catch up to their peers. This year, we hosted 7 distributions. We served over 1,587 families, which represents 7,491 individuals. Staff and volunteers distributed 101,157 pounds of food. We continue to discuss ways that we can partner with Second Harvest to serve children and families at our libraries and throughout. Mountain States Early Head Start is a great example of a strong collaboration and partnership. When Early Head Start hosts a program or event, they often invite us to be a special guest or just attend to meet their families. They understand the importance of early learning and the value offered by the library and are truly oftentimes the first to invite us out to an event. We in turn distribute their program information and refer families who may be in need of services. With over 2,200 children under the age of 5 living below the poverty line in our service area, it is critical for us to collaborate with community partners to provide programs and services to help lift children and families up and strengthen our entire community. United Way of North Idaho focuses on 3 areas: education, health, and financial education, as well as connecting local volunteers to community need. We have collaborated with United Way on numerous education and school readiness projects over the years. Our relationship is such that when they meet someone out in the community, they make a point to send an introductory email to us so that we can collaborate and work together. If they have grant funds to award for early childhood projects, they reach out to see if they have unmet needs. A positive sign of a strong partnership is when they think of you for introductions, come to you with projects and funding ideas, or when you are top of mind for a person or organization in the community to work with. So why do we partner with United Way and the Early Learning Collaborative, Mountain States Early Head Start Policy Council, the Inovia Foundation Launch Northwest Project, or the Regional Early Childhood Committee? Because this is part of what makes strong community partnerships. We can learn about broad community initiatives and specific areas of need, as well as share about the work of libraries. It takes time and effort, but the benefits and rewards are always plentiful. Bethany, Katie, and Megan have worked hard this year to build a strong partnership with the park rangers at Farragut State Park. The Be Outside project was a grant opportunity that allowed us to work with the park rangers at Farragut to develop an area behind their visitor center. This space includes raised bed butterfly garden, a little community library, seating, including a beautiful 8-foot wooden bench, and programming space for our NatureBerry programs. High school volunteers helped with the clearing of the space, and Storytime children and families planted the flowers. Having children and teens involved in the project was a key component, as it provided them an opportunity to be invested in the NatureBerry space and something that they could be proud of. NatureBerry is our nature-based outdoor literacy program. It began 6 years ago and has expanded to weekly summer programs and monthly year-round programs at Farragut State Park, as well as around the district. Families can purchase an annual park pass for $10 or pick up a free day pass at any of our libraries. Park rangers participate in every program and help brainstorming on future ideas. The rangers have been great partners for us, often sharing possible programs such as moonlight hikes as a way to reach additional members of the community. They support the program through word of mouth. They often post about us on social media, and they post flyers around the park. Weekly NatureBerry programs this summer provided residents and visitors the opportunity to get hands-on with nature, learn about the world around them, explore the park on a variety of nature hikes, and engage with library staff during story time and STEAM activities. And they got to learn from our local experts, our park rangers. The youth services staff continues to develop their relationships with our local government agencies, including the City of Athol, Hayden, and Rathdrum, as well as our Parks and Recreation departments in Athol, Hayden, Post Falls, and Rathdrum. From movie nights, concerts, and fishing derbies, to community hikes, bike rodeos, and national night out events, the library has been invited to participate in events that help strengthen and build community. We are invited because we have proven ourselves to be strong, reliable, engaged community partners. We look forward to many successful partnerships and collaborations in the coming year. Do you have any questions?
Yes. Resituated and then we'll see if we have questions. This off. Turn that off.
Yeah, it's kind of right.
It's blinding. Good. Thank you. Yes. Okay, were there any questions or comments that they'd like to make?
Karin, you didn't bring us anything to play with this time.
I was going to.
No, your monthly reports from your team are always phenomenal, and the youth services department is just, amazing. So thank you very much. The one question I had is whether you've noticed in your experience with our well-attended programs, if any of our library facilities aren't necessarily keeping up with growth and the number of attendees.
The short answer is yes. And it really depends on what program it is. So Miss Katie had a program here Friday evening, and I think she had 100 in this room during the program. So it really just depends on which program. We do limit the size of some, for example, sensory story time because of the needs of that audience. But other libraries, for example, Harrison doesn't have a meeting room. So when we plan programs, we have to keep in mind what that might look like for libraries that have a smaller space. So short answer, yes. We could always use more.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Thank you for your presentation. The sensory story time, I think you said 8 or less. Now, is it always 8 or what is the typical amount?
Yeah,
Do you have to turn people away?
Yeah, well, if we do, we have a waiting list, and we do 8 because usually a couple of kiddos aren't going to come. And we keep those designs small because we have found that children that are part of that sensory processing, the larger the group, the more issues they have because the noise and the chaos and all the people. So we have found that just keeping it at that level is the best. So staff have been asked to keep track if there are people on the waiting list, and then we can add programs based on that need. Or if a family member, because they have to register, lets us know in enough time, we can call and say, oh, Vanessa, we have an opening if you're able to join us tomorrow.
So it's been pretty full though. Okay, and then my other question was the Second Harvest partnership. Is there ever any complaints from library patrons about, place to park or like anything because of the parking lot usage?
So the one we just did recently was over at Hayden. And people started arriving 2 hours prior to the distribution, which was, we were not prepared for people to arrive at 9. And so we wound traffic around all through the parking lot that is the movie theater parking lot and the church that's there. We wound around all the way out to the highway, which was definitely an issue. So we've had conversations about what that looks like. Most of the time members are just curious about what's going on.
And how long have you been doing this partnership with Second Harvest? This first year?
We started during the pandemic, so it's been a couple of years.
Okay. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yes.
Because, yeah, I can see that could be a problem because I've seen those kind of traffic jams.
Yes, and we try really hard, and the Second Harvest, they're really the experts in this, and so they really give us pointers on what's the best way to navigate traffic. Again, we were not prepared for people to come 2 hours. Usually it's about a half an hour prior, and we can handle that because we're ready.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How often does the sensory story time happen?
So we have it hosted at 3 libraries currently. Pinehurst hosts it monthly. And then Hayden and Post Falls have also started monthly, but it will most likely move towards weekly as those staff build their.
That is, that's neat. That is really, sounds like a great program. Anything else that we want highlighted?
Oh, question, the sensory. Thanks for all your good work. I looked at the report, I think it was like 25 pages long or something. It's remarkable. On the sensory programs, have an age limit? Did you say 8 years old?
So we're gearing it towards children who are in that birth to 5 or 6, because a lot of times those children are then in some sort of program. Prior to COVID, when we hosted this program, we did have a gal who was 22, but she had the mental capacity of a 3-year-old. So we just explained to the caregivers that, so they understand that this person who looks as an adult is actually at a preschool level. So we do host life skills programs at multiple libraries. So those are the high school kiddos that are also part of that audience. And so we host them monthly at our libraries too. So there's other opportunities besides just sensory story time for children that have special needs.
And I think that's what I was trying to understand was that it's a universal issue at universal ages and sizes.
It is. And if we find that more of those children, during the school year, like I said, they're in other programs, but if we find more of those children in that higher age category, then we will add a program.
An issue during COVID because some of the programs may not have been available, maybe coming back into service now.
Right.
Different topic on a question about the partnership with the parks. That means folks have to get to the parks to attend the nature berry programs.
Yes, and so we do a variety of parks around. So we just spotlighted Farragut, but we do nature berry programs at a lot of our city parks. So I did Spirit Lake City Park, Apple City Park, Stoddard Park. So they do have to get to one of the parks.
And we're not involved in any of that transportation issue. Other than telling people, this is the time and the place.
Correct. Yeah, just letting them know.
Does any of the public transportation system provide that kind of an option?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, unless people take the public bus.
Right, that's what I'm. Because I think we're surprised at how many folks don't have access to transportation.
Correct.
Particularly moms at home with their kids.
Yeah.
I guess overall, it's just finer programs. I'm so proud to be part of cheering you on. Good job.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, Karen, thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. And next item on our agenda is Karin Hall from our Outreach Bookmobile program. Karen, would you like us to go around and introduce ourselves? We don't see you quite as often.
I know a lot of you said there's.
We can start. How about if we start over here?
Ahead.
How would if, Michelle, would you like to start?
Judy Meyer from the Hayden Lake area.
Vanessa Robinson, I have met you in the past.
Yes. Katie Blank.
Regina McCree. Hi, I'm Katie Brereton. I'm the attorney for the library.
Okay. Thank you.
So once again, my name is Karin Hall, and that's Karin spelled with an I, which is different than the other Karin with an E. Oh, you don't need to do the.
No, we need to.
Okay, okay. Um,
That's it. Oh, okay.
That's okay. You just have.
okay.
Amy, help me make sure this is right. Right.
Oh, God.
Up there, yeah.
The light on?
Oh, yeah, the lights.
The light's not on. The light that was blinding us.
That helps. Does that help you see? I'm not sure if you. Light on the subject.
Ooh, it's our fault, Regina. I know.
Like takes a while to power down. Now it's it's coming back on.
Oh, wait a minute. Tell us how long you've been with the library.
I started with the Bookmobile in August of 2001, so I'm in my 22nd year. Yeah, and I've been the manager since 2016, October.
So you just stuck in this century.
I did, I just made it, yeah. I did.
Yeah.
Okay, once again, I'm Bookmobile and Outreach Manager, and this is my report for 2022. So the Bookmobile is one of 8 libraries in Kootenai and Western Churchill counties that make up the community library network. And it all started with a Bookmobile. So if you can see, this is in the history of our library district that the library district actually began in 1977. And it was Corley Library that provided staff, but it was a Bookmobile. That was our library system. So unfortunately, you can't see it that well, but that's the very first schedule of Bookmobile from February 1st, 1977. And it's a lot of places like Canyon School, Rose Lake, Valley Mart over at Metamont, and Kootenai Schools, and those are still places we go today. This is another schedule. I just thought it was cool, these schedules. And this shows that back when we were still, the library was still a Bookmobile, or just a Bookmobile, that we went north, south, east, and west. And like we went up to, we went to Yother, we went to Bayview, we went over Pleasant View. There's an old school over there. We went over there, over the mountains, south to Worley. And back then, all of our stops were rural. But there's a lot of questions. A lot of times we go places and people, they don't know what a Bookmobile is even. Like they think, oh, we're selling books, or they can just come in and take any book they want, like without checking them out. So they're not sure what a Bookmobile is, and they're also not sure what outreach is. So basically, without reading that whole Wikipedia thing, that a bookmobile is a library on wheels. And we go places where otherwise people wouldn't have, they wouldn't have access to a public library. Outreach is kind of the same kind of thing. It provides services to populations that might not otherwise have access to those services. So this is a picture of one of the first bookmobiles. And the person who was driving it was our former director, John Hartung, which is kind of funny to think of. He had so many great stories. Oh my God. I mean, we all, when you drive the bookmobile, you all get stories, but he had some really good stories. So when I applied for this job in 2001, I was working at a different library then, and I asked them, so have you ever seen the bookmobile? Like, what does it look like? And they said, oh, it's an old bread truck. So I'm like, okay, I can do that. I drive a Toyota now. I drive a Subaru. I can drive an old bread truck. But then I did my interview, and then afterwards, Twyla, who was my boss, she asked me, so would you like to see the bookmobile? I'm like, sure. So I opened up the bookmobile garage, and the next picture, that's what it was. I'm like, really? Yeah, it was about a 30-foot long bluebird bus. So no, it was not a bread truck. And this is the bookmobile that the library district acquired in 1992. Then in March of 2007, really exciting time, we got the new Thomas-built diesel bus. It's about 36.5 feet long. It's funny, that extra 6 feet, it doesn't really add any more ability to put more items on there, but it moved the engine from in between the driver's seat in the front to the back. And the generator used to be on the lower left on the side, and that also moved to the back. The only thing is that having 6 extra feet means you drive it differently. You take turns differently, you have to take them wider. And so it was a real learning curve, but you know, after a while, it's kind of funny because you get used to driving it. It's kind of like driving your other car. Actually, I have a license plate holder that says I have a dogmobile. I always like those bumper stickers that say my other car is a bookmobile, but I don't get it. So we go, one of the places we go with the bookmobile, we go to some schools. We go to STEM Charter Academy in Brereton, Christian Center School down off Prairie in Hayden, Kootenai School, which is around near Harrison, Holy Family Catholic School, which is in Court Lane, Canyon School over near Cataldo, and starting November 1st, we're going to be going to Elevate, a new school, anyway, a new school that's got middle school and high schoolers in Post Falls.
It's a charter school.
Pardon me?
Is it a charter school?
Yes, it's a charter school. It's like a, what am I trying to say? It's jobs, more skills school. And we also go to 4 different school classes. So we go to the schools, we usually go 2 times a month, and to the school classes, we go 1 time a month.
How do you choose those schools?
It's kind of, we try and work, so it's kind of like if they, like Kootenai schools and Kenny, we've been going to, you know, forever.
Right.
It's kind of if they request, or sometimes we ask them if they want us to come. It's really good if they request it, because then they really want us to come. So rural communities, we go to Bayview, Hauser, Micah Flats, the range there. We go to Fighting Creek store. We go to Metamont. We go to Rose Lake, and this is Hardy. This is our stop at Hardy. So that's over near Cataldo. So we go year round, like some people think we don't go in the winter. No, we go in the winter. Some people think, like when you say to a teacher, have a good break for summer, they're like, you have a good break too. It's like, no, we don't have a break. We go about 7,000 miles a year. And as I said, it's a library on wheels. We have hundreds of books and other materials. Got something for everybody. We've got kids books, we've got adult books, we have everything that a regular, or sometimes people say, we're going to go to the real library, which it kind of hurts our feelings, but we try to eliminate barriers by taking our services to communities and other places where people can get to a regular library. So this is a kind of a look inside the bookmobile. More than half our shelves are kids books. We also have on the first picture on the left, those are adult fiction books on the first 4 shelves. On the bottom couple of shelves, those are the youth nonfiction. And you can see over on the right-hand side, we have some markers for those. And then just a picture looking down through the bookmobile. And we also have, if you, on the left-hand side there, that first picture, we have books on CD, and then we also have playaways, which are really getting popular. The middle one, we have DVDs. We have the kids ones on the bottom shelf, and then we have adult ones. And then we also have adult nonfiction.
I'm all for the blind.
You know, we have, well, I guess the books on CD, we've gotten, we don't have it with us, but we've gotten talking books. We've been sent one of their players so we can go around and we can demonstrate. We have a couple of Braille books, but that's pretty much, yeah.
And I think the state library system deals more with blind. Right.
Yes, yeah.
So it's not as if-
Talking book system.
Right. And they are library that went through you then to get them delivered to those rural areas, or are they mailed?
They actually work directly with the Idaho Code book and then they get them mailed. So we have another vehicle, the Sprinter van, and a lot of times people call it the bookmobile. With this vehicle, well, okay, one thing that happened when we got our new bookmobile is besides you had to learn how to drive a little differently, it also did not fit into every parking lot we went to. This was already in the planning stage, but we got the Sprinter van so we could take our library service into senior facilities, which is also better in a lot of ways for older people. Those steps to get the bookmobile are tough. And I mean, especially for me right now, they're really tough to get up. But with the Sprinter van, we have our what we call lobby stop service.
Doesn't the bookmobile also have a ramp to help folks get up?
Yes. Not working though, yeah.
I know we worked on making sure that it was accessible by a ramp or a lift. That still work okay?
It's not working.
That's an opportunity.
Yeah. So the cart we take in, there's books on both sides of the cart. The books on there are large print books. There's about 100 altogether. And in the two containers on the bottom, one of them has DVDs and one of them has books on CD. So we take that into a location set up. And we have a lot of requests. So we take bags. We have these great old canvas bags that we load up with books. It's a request for people. Oh, sorry. And there was a picture on the right. It had the, we also keep some books on the Sprinter. So you can see on the shelves in there. So between these two services, we visit 6 schools, 4 after-school programs, 7 rural communities, and then 21 senior facilities, usually twice a month. Another thing we do is when we get donations, we pick out some of the nicer books and that, and we take them to the Community Action Food Bank and also to the Help Center. And that way, people that are using those resources, that is a way to encourage lifelong learning and to promote enjoyment of reading to them too. Bookmobile and outreach, we're really active in community events, and we represent the district. So throughout the year, unfortunately this year, Family Day in the Park was canceled because it was pouring in the morning. We've done that. We did Earth Day celebration. We usually do like the community, like Hayden Days and things like that, and more. And we're in parades. We represent the library district. So this year we were in the Harrison Parade, the Apple Parade, the Post Falls Parade, the Spirit Lake Parade. Spirit Lake Parade's great because the whole staff really gets into it. Yeah. Like that. We also take adult programming into senior facilities. So it's a little different, regular libraries say, okay, we're gonna make cards at 2 o'clock on Friday. We can't do that. We have to work around with activity directors and facilities, and we take our programs into their place. These are some of the fun things that we've done. I love the little bunny pots up there. Those are so cute. And We did fairy houses and iris foliage cards and just all kinds of stuff. So another thing that I like, I call it housekeeping. Those are the tasks that we have to do to keep things running smoothly. You know, that's like the regular library stuff, like checking in books and checking in and out books, shelving books, doing hold requests, stocking the vehicles, which that's something we do a lot of, and organizing the collection. So these are up against the wall by the garage, and these are run shelves. So we have a label that has the location that we're going to be going, and then whatever holds are for somebody that lives at that location, those go there. And then the next time we go, we load those up and we take those with us. Another fun thing that when you're driving a big vehicle, you have to have a commercial driver's license. And so every morning before you take the bookmobile out, you are required to do a pre-check. Yeah, and then there are those days. Have a number of those days, you know, there's a leak, bookmobile will start, the brake line melted through. I mean, it's kind of funny in a way, but yeah, there's a lot of days that feel like that. So to work in this, for this library, you need to, oh, I forgot to say sense of humor. You need to enjoy working with people, pay attention to detail, be able to drive a large vehicle, be comfortable working alone, be adventurous, and maybe a little crazy. Because a lot of people like, I never want to drive something like that. So for our future, well, to the next one, I'm not really sure. Things change right now. We have the new school, Elevate, we're going to be going to. We're going to start some digital open houses and technology programs at some of our senior facilities. One of our staff is going to start, she started a Card of the Month club. And like I said, stay tuned because possibilities are limitless. And just to introduce you to our staff, Connie has been, she started out at Hayden in October of 2008. And she came back with the bookmobile 2 years later in October of 2010. So she's been there quite a while. Sarah's been with us, something about October, she didn't start in October. She's been for 5 years. She just started in October 5 years ago. I should say that Sarah does not drive the bookmobile. She drives the Sprinter van, and she also does a lot of the adult programming. And then we have Rachel. She's been with us. She actually started in February of 2000, got her license, the CDL, the day before everything closed down. So then it was a matter of like, they'd come to work and they would just drive around in the bookmobile. They didn't go visit people. And then we have Chris. He's our newest employee. He's been here almost a year, and he also shares time with emerging technology. I had to share this picture because when Twyla was manager, Twyla was very creative. We used to do, oh my gosh, we spent a lot of time and energy doing decorating the bookmobile for parades. This was my favorite. This was early, probably, I don't know, 2004 maybe. And so I had to share this picture. And the very last one, this is my daughter back then, back at the back of the bus, the end. You have any questions?
Yes, let's get resituated here.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, questions or concerns or comments?
Okay, actually, I do have to ask this. What parade is it at night like that?
That's the Festival of Lights Parade, which is the day after Thanksgiving.
Okay, yeah, that's super cute.
Yeah, I know. We had a dog when I wanted to take a trip to. That was so cute. It was like sheets, fitted sheets that bumped that from the side.
How do you pick what you're stocking the bookmobile with? Did you just rotate out of the general collection or?
We actually have our own collection.
Okay, that's.
And then we get new stuff. We have routers that go to different libraries and come through to us. Mostly we're given books. We also can request things.
Right.
And what happens is we have a lot of, especially like in May when school's ending and we have a lot of overflow. So we have a lot of shelves in our office. And we keep those in there, and then we just keep every day we go to school, we have to Some of the schools, we have like 100 kids,
Right.
so we have to restock every day.
I'll question on that. Where is home base for you and where do you get the materials in? I think the bookmobile being housed.
Yes, it's at the back of the Hayden Library, and so our office is back there too. It's right, you go to tech services and then you go through.
And the Sprinter is also back?
Printer's also there, yeah.
And is that covered up enough in bad weather that you can work on a printer? So the bookmobile.
They're both inside.
Okay. it's just-
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What's really cute is when they do tours and kids come through.
Uh-huh.
And like the other day, Nexa, I think, and they came and both vehicles were there and they opened the door, they go, oh my gosh, and they were so excited.
Maybe sometime we can tour it.
Yeah.
We have. We have. Yeah.
Not recent.
Ish, well, with Rochelle and I were on the board.
Oh, yeah,
That's within the year then, yeah. Okay,
yeah, we'll have to do that.
thank you.
I'm wondering as, you know, of usage of
Mhm.
things change, in terms of usage of bookmobiles and for our more rural stops, are they getting bigger? Are they getting less? You know, what are the changes that you see in the bookmobile use and for outreach services?
For the bookmobile use for the rural stops, it kind of depends. It does seem like it's gone down some, I would say. As for schools, those are busy. The senior facilities, those are really busy. So in general, things are so good.
Are there places that you wish you could go that you're not going, or where you see a need, like?
Well, there are some places that are, well, there's one place that we wanted to go that's in Coeur d'Alene. It's the silver senior apartments, but we're not able to go there because it's within the Coeur d'Alene taxing district. But there's a lot of people there that I think we can reach.
Okay, so are services maybe moving from rural services to more things like the schools and or senior centers or living place situations like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, because we've tried so many times with Hauser over the years, and we were trying it again, and even Bayview, I went to Bayview yesterday, and we had one person on. For some reason, you know, we advertise, people know they just, and I think a lot of things like Hauser, there's no school there, there's no senior center, there's no post office, at least not in downtown Hauser. But there's really nothing that attracts people there. So whenever they take their kids to school, they take them to Post Falls, Rath, or wherever, when they go to shop. So they're not really, I think they just go places, do their stuff and go home.
Right, you want the library to be on your way, you know, on your way to the post, on your way to the grocery store or something like
And we've even tried going there on Monday evenings now from 5 to 7. And, you know, once again, it just hasn't, we did flyers, we've done so many things and it just doesn't ever seem to be very successful.
that. Yeah, okay. And, okay, anybody else?
Question on the dilemma that I think we, the board, have puzzled through before was, as you mentioned, sharing with Coeur d'Alene, because they don't have a bookmobile, but they have a lot of senior facilities within. And where are we with that kind of a predicament?
And I don't know, I mean, there are some that were kind of grandfathered in that we still go to, but yeah, not like the senior silver apartments, I don't know, within the last 5-7 years. Yeah, we weren't allowed to go there.
And weren't allowed by us, by Coeur d'Alene, by.
Well, it was kind of a both libraries, just kind of.
And I'm not assuming that's wrong. I just think it's an ongoing topic. We have the silver tsunami happening nationwide, which is more silver folk needing both the facilities and lifestyle impact. That may be a marketplace we haven't gotten to yet that might come along. And I think that census will help us get a sense of where people are. That may have to become a criteria. If the population isn't large enough to justify the cost of delivering there. Do we serve on weekends?
Not usually. We used to for years, and another place I wish we could get service going again, but once again, it's kind of like Hauser is Worley. We used to go to Worley.
Mhm.
We used to go there on 2 Tuesdays a month to the school and 2 Saturdays a month. And then they just, from 1977 on, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, people just, a lot of the people that came out to the Bookmobile were ones that lived outside. They weren't really the ones that lived in town. And so they were just more into something like that.
Mhm.
We tried this summer because we had a couple of days. So we we went down to Worley 2 times a month and we went along the lake. That was another route we used to go. We had like 1 person out of like 6 times. So we had a lot more success. I should have mentioned it. We did something called pop-up Bookmobile. And that actually went really well. So we're gonna do a lot more of that next year. Just we show up at park. We're gonna go to different communities next year, and just here we are.
One other question on thinking about Worley, and what do we do with the Coeur d'Alene tribe? Do they have their own? I know there's a library in Worley.
I mean, Plummer.
And Plummer. I thought I saw one in Worley too, right there. Anyway,
They used to have something in the city hall, but I don't think it was a
okay.
real.
Is that really in our territory to serve?
Yeah.
Plumbers now.
Yeah.
Well, we changed the Benoit County, don't we?
I was gonna say, I mean, Benoit County does have a couple, library systems. There's Plummer
Outreach
and
there.
there's a few others. But anything that would be in Kootenai County, which, the tribe does cover some, would be.
I just think it's something that we as a board need to keep monitoring. How do we do outreach and how we support you? When you see ideas or try them out. I think it's good to
Well,
try.
we wish because we feel bad because we go as far south as Pine Creek. That's an elder road and Highway 95. And that's as far south as we go now.
But there are people that live south of that. So
Yeah.
now we gotta figure out how to, yeah, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, well, Karen, thank you very much. We really
Thank you for
appreciate
the
it.
opportunity.
Yeah.
I want to follow up a second on the other lift.
We do have a lot of stuff on our agenda. Is it,
I just don't want to lose track of that. The lift is not working right, is that what I heard?
okay, we can,
So I would have put that on the list for the staff to come back to us and tell us.
about the lift on facilities.
Access to our book. Yep. Please.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yep.
All right. I did want to talk about the meeting timing. We do have quite a few things on this agenda, and we will very likely not be able to get everything on the agenda. There are a couple of things. We have our attorney here. We have, the McGrath Human Resources who are going to talk to us. So the one thing that I'm going to move is the material selection policy. We'll move it to the end if we're not able to get to it today. We've carved out a chunk of time at our meeting on Monday.
We
Video
do
was-
confirm the meeting on Monday then.
Yes, there is a meeting on Monday.
Time, please.
That's 24th, yeah, 2 to 5. 2 to 5 on Monday at Post Falls.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the regular meeting of September 15th, September CIN financial statement, and the community library September 2022 report.
Just real quick, there were no CIN minutes. Was there a reason for that?
CIN did not meet in September, so did not approve the August minutes. So, because we did not meet, we'll be off by a month now. We always have the month, so usually it would have been the August minutes, but it's after CIN has approved them, but they haven't met to approve.
Gotcha,
question
yeah,
on it
it was a
then.
little confusing.
Yeah. So their calendar financial year is the same as ours. So when we get there, September last minute, we had the financial statements for the end of the year for them. So what we're seeing is what it really cost last year. Thank you.
Okay, anything on the consent agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Well, I'll move that we accept the consent agenda. I had no changes.
Okay, it's been moved to accept the consent agenda. Is there discussion?
Yes, actually, the CLN meeting minutes.
From September 13th?
Yes. On page 3. And it's about half. 11 lines down on page 3. Where it says absence of there are good points in the documents, but would like something referencing minors. I was trying to be really clear about it being a developmental inability of children to make critical judgments, because otherwise it just sounds like I'm calling kids idiots who can't, think. It's just that they're developmentally not able to make the same kind of critical judgments as adults. So I would like developmental in front of inability to make their own critical judgments.
Tell me where developmental is.
Right before the word inability.
I'll amend my motion to include that change. And while we're still digesting these, I did want to comment on the board reports. I just really love the story about having the kids write an essay for who got to take home the reading buddies, and then how new reading buddies were ordered. That was just, anyway, so phenomenal. Kudos to Apple for that.
All right, any other changes?
I think on page 3, at the very bottom, last bullet point. Yeah, page 3. It might be right, but it doesn't sound right to me. Meyer reminded about the election in November and the state budget. Is that just?
What's wrong with doing that?
Yeah.
Remind everybody that there is an election, but I do it.
Noted. Myron noted the election in November. Okay, anything else? All right, how about this? It's been moved to accept the consent agenda with the changes, with changes. How does that sound? Yep. Okay. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The next thing on the agenda is our community library, September 2020 financial statements, which is our green stuff. We had questions or concerns. I think Judy, you had talked about something.
Yeah, thank you. And what I was thinking was, as a board, this is now the September report, which means, as it says, 1,000% of time elapsed. Is that what that said?
I think that was.
Wow.
Should be 100%.
Well, more importantly, it was 100%. But still, then I think it's a moment for our board to take a look at as we prepare for next year, because now we're into next year. How our costs went, some you've identified both over the year and then our last report to us. But I went through, for instance, and just circled some things that were more than 100%, even though they weren't 1,000. For any comments our staff has on what we're doing there. If you start at the top of the current month year to date, or we should be at 100% or thereabouts. There's some there at 154%. Am I reading that right? Sales tax and ag equipment. If you could comment on a couple of those, do we have time then, Chair? It seems to me this is our basis for which we do next year.
I apologize, Amy. I should have asked you, since this is the end of the year report would you like to share on this?
That's fine. Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit kind of throughout this year that sales tax is coming in higher than expected. I think for next year, we did raise our estimate a little bit, but didn't want to raise it all the way because of the unpredictability, of the economy. But yeah, so sales tax has definitely come in higher than anticipated, as well as the next line item. And some of those are just harder to predict because some of this is, you'll see even the property tax relief on line 6. So again, we kind of look at, you know, the trends and averages and so forth.
Before you leave that one, wasn't, in our last meeting, I remember noting that we were gonna talk to the county commissioners about their choices on refunding. Help me with it.
Penalties and interest.
Yeah, penalties and interest, yes, and I think that, I think as of right now, the county's still moving forward with that change. They haven't changed direction, so.
We were gonna write a letter to them.
I did write a letter, and several other entities, you know, had already
Right.
written that previous letter. I've been following closely, but it doesn't look like they've changed their minds, and so, I think, you know, we've certainly made our, you know, decisions around that it did come late in the budget cycle, you know, in terms of,
Yeah.
being, you know, weren't able to take that into account, you know, for this next budget. So yes, there hasn't been any update on that.
And yeah, along that same line, did we actually, was that ever in our budget? The predicted penalties? Or that was just something extra that came in?
That's just extra, you know, that comes in, because again, it's when people pay, when the county gets those property tax in arrears.
Right, no, but I talked to some people that they actually predict it and have it as like a line item.
So
I didn't think we did.
No, so I mean, really, it's more just, might have been nice to, just our estimate might have changed slightly, but we don't say for, you know, we're gonna get 30,000 this year, we're gonna get.
So we don't operate on unknown income that might happen.
Yeah.
Well, it does, if it does, and now we're gonna have to help remember. The one I want to highlight, because you're going down the list, is good, the donations number.
Yes.
That a 293% increase?
Yes, so we did, you know, receive more donations than anticipated. This is again, always one that, some years we get more and some years we don't, but we, you know, it did come in higher than anticipated. Grants definitely, came in higher. That one because it is an in and out number, that even if we over budget or under budget, you know, the line 36 down below would also adjust accordingly. So that one, yes, definitely, we did receive more grants than anticipated. And then we did have, the one area where we were under, well, we had a couple areas, not too many though, but interest was under. And then we did have, one of our, grants for, the CLN Friends, which is a little bit under. I don't think we asked as much this year as we have in the past. But that's.
Before you leave revenue, then I want to know what suggestions you have our donations always increased by 300%.
Well, there were a few things. I mean, there were definitely some donations for specific programs that happened this year based on some things that were in the press. So we did get quite a few donations for Rainbow Squad because of some of the press. And so that was unanticipated. And we're not going to necessarily assume that that's going to happen in the future, right? So, and then sometimes, you know, I mean, some of our past large donations, you know, when we end up in a bequest or something like that, we just
That's windfall.
exactly, we don't know when that will come, but it's always certainly nice to get.
Watching, thank you.
Yeah.
How about expenditures?
So expenditures, for the areas where we were under, were some areas that we will be coming back there were some projects we had to put on hold, either based on just not getting vendors lined up to do the work. So there were some of our repair and maintenance and capital projects. If you look at kind of our programs, materials and services, we weren't too far off there. I mean, for the total as a whole, line 39. But we were a little bit under, as we prior mentioned in previous months, for telecom and internet access, because that state reimbursement, you know, we budget that we're not going to get it, and then we did end up getting it this year. But it does already take into account E-rate. The grants, yes, you can see we're over, but again, we were over on the income. So that was more of and those don't always match exactly, because sometimes we're in the mid-grant cycle. And so we still have time to spend, you know, the grant, particularly if it came from, you know, an outside entity, you know, not our friends group.
How about the 42 and 43 where we have outreach, things we've been talking about today?
Yeah, so definitely we've had some vehicle maintenance, much higher than normal. I think all of our outreach vehicles have had some repairs. Both the Sprinter van, the Discovery bus, and the Bookmobile have all had higher than normal repairs. And then mileage, as we know, gas has been.
They always have higher than normal repairs.
Yes.
Right.
Right, and then our repair and you'll see the total facility maintenance for line 60. We did end
point.
under,
Yeah.
but you'll see that some areas were well over and then some were under. So we knew, for example, line 50 for Spirit Lake, we did the parking lot, so that put Spirit Lake over, but then we put on hold some things at Post Falls and Pinehurst because of that, as well as Athol. So again, mid-year we adjusted. We knew we were going to be under, but we prioritized the Spirit Lake parking lot. And then utilities have been actually remarkably kind of on track. And the snow removal, we were heavy in the beginning of the winter, and then then there was no snow the rest of in January through March. So we ended up being under there as well.
I think you made a good point on the total maintenance being at 92%. Because the crystal ball that you have to look at is not only just what the winter weather is, but what system isn't gonna work that we didn't know wasn't gonna work. If you can juggle them and still keep within 100%, then mission accomplished. Except get ready for whatever next year is.
Exactly.
Good. And then for me at least, the others I highlighted were the ones over 100%. So bank service charges, I think you wrote to us, Janelle, said that was happening. Copiers, they're always requiring maintenance, aren't they? That's line 58.
And on a good note, our copy, if you look at the first page, the prior page, line 8, our income for copier and printers is more than we anticipated. And then the expense has increased as well. I mean, those aren't necessarily direct, line in, line out, but it does offset. I mean, they are supposed to offset to some degree.
That's kind of the theme that we're working on. I think it's budgeting now. Seems to me we budget every month for how we're doing and where we're gonna end up. At least this one is a summary of the year. Looks to me like it was always variables, but within reason. The year went well.
Right, and line 78, our capital expenditure was well under. Those were 2 big projects that we did not do, were the Harrison remodel, and that was partially with some of the water issues that needed to be fixed first, and then there was just no way to fit it in this fiscal year, and I think
So it
been
hasn't gone
talking
away,
about
it's
that.
just been delayed.
It's been delayed,
Okay.
and then the other one was there was another, that was the main one.
I'm drawing.
I'm sorry. Oh, yes, that was exactly it, the Hayden berm, which is not going to necessarily be something, we maybe have a different solution for that. But those were 2 capital projects that we did not do, which is why we're under there. So starting next month, so this is end of September, so this is year end, but we do have invoices that come in a little bit late. So this was the snapshot as of when Janelle created the report, a week ago, but we will still have some September invoices that come in. So at our November board meeting, we'll start talking about some of that additional carry forward, and then what do we do with it?
Okay, commendations on team effort together. I like it on green paper, that's where it should. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or concerns about the financial report for this year? All right, would entertain a motion to accept that.
We're gonna do it last time.
I think you deserve this.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the September 2022 Community Library Network financial statements and analysis.
Okay, it's been moved to accept the Community Library Network September 30th, 2022 financial statements and analysis. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All righty, that sounds good, thank you. And the next item on the agenda is our circulation statistics. You want to?
Just really quick, I'll say this again, is because it was fiscal year end. You'll see some of the year-to-date numbers, for most everything. I mean, I think this is to be anticipated. We were higher than end of year last year. And that was partially because fiscal year 2021 included a couple months of scaled back services and so forth. But circulation, visits, all of that, well up over end of year last year. So.
Oh, it should be.
Yeah.
Good. Anything else? Anybody want to comment on? That's good. It's really good. It would be really sad if we weren't. All right. And then our next item on the agenda. When do we? Okay. Well, the next item on the agenda is the director's report.
And I'm going to just be really quick. You have kind of my written report in front of you, so I don't have much to add to that. But I do want to recognize, and I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but it is National Friends of the Library Week, and we have a few of our friends sitting in the audience. So we just want to thank them for all of their hard work. This is our Community Library Network Friends group based out of Hayden, but serves all of the district, and then we have our Post Falls friends. But thank you so much for all the work you do.
Yeah. Introduce themselves, we need to know.
Oh, if you feel comfortable doing so, you're welcome.
Leslie Weil, Vice President.
I think there's another name for president, didn't I see it?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's all I have.
Okay. All right. So the next item on any questions or that you guys want to talk about? Any questions for Amy for the director's report?
Cheryl, Amy, you mentioned in November the final salary schedule approval. Will that come to us before that to look at, to think about?
Hopefully.
That's always good to hope. Thank you.
Yes. Our consultants are working really, really hard to meet our November deadline. And so that is the hope, is that we would have something in your packet.
So we'll bank on that.
Okay, so they are next,
Yes, and Malayna is here, but I'm going to need to hook her up so that you all can see her.
Oh, okay. While she's doing that, why don't you guys take a quick break?
Can we turn the air conditioning?
Yeah, it's freezing.
It's so close.
Yeah, we'll find Randy, Lindsay.
I have that cold. I locked it.
And you have your jacket, don't forget.
You can at least put on your lap.
If you put something on your lap.
What? I don't know. That was just really kind. It was just like.
It's surprising that you don't want to put it here. You just put it here and it makes a big difference.
I was trying to not look so severe. Because I was freezing when I came in.
Oh, and I wasn't. I was.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you have put that in.
I did. But
But I get cold really fast. I always have. I moved to Michigan when I was from California. I hated it, even as.
so you got a chill in you then and it's never left.
Right. I don't know why. I liked LA. It was fine with me.
Yeah.
So they're gonna be up there, so they might want to go over.
Involved all the time.
Who's
Who's gonna use salary?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, well, the screen's like that. That's okay.
Malayna, can you hear me?
I sure can. Can you hear me? Oh, no, I lost you. There you, okay. You were there, now you're not. You're like breaking up. Nope.
Okay, all right.
There we go. Do we have a bad connection?
You know what? Let me double check. I can see I'm delayed a little bit.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah. We'll be ready for you in about 2 or 3 minutes.
Not a problem. Do you want, I see that we're recording now. Do you want me to just do a screen share right now just to make sure that we can get this up on the screen? Is that okay?
Yes, and I'm gonna actually pause the recording. I turn it over here. We have been undergoing a compensation study with McGrath Human Resources, and they're still in the midst of doing great research. We'll have the final findings hopefully next month is our goal. But Malayna is here to kind of share some of the preliminary findings, and then we'll have kind of a final compensation schedule, at future meetings to approve. But we wanted to share some of what McGrath has found out. So Malayna, thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Malayna Halverson Maes. Excuse me. I'm a senior consultant with McGrath Human Resources Group, and my background is human resources, both in the private and public level. I have spent about 20 years in the chair before I decided to give that up and start consulting with McGrath, and I've been with the firm now for about 8 years. I tend to do a lot of the library projects that we provide across the United States. We provide compensation type support to, we've got about 400 clients and almost, I think actually we've exceeded now 40 different states. And so I appreciate the opportunity of working with the Community Library Network. What I want to do this afternoon is to give you a brief overview of what we have done up to this point in the project, because things on your end have been relatively quiet, even though we've been very busy on ours. And that's sometimes a little bit frustrating because you know that this project is underway, but sometimes we're not at a point where we can share information, but things are now going to be happening relatively quickly. And as Amy indicated, the goal is for me to have my final recommendations back in front of the organization here in about a month. And so that means that we've got a lot of work to do in a very small amount of time. And I'll walk through with you kind of where we are at this point. Just to frame the project, and I'm sure that you all understand and know what it is that I'm doing, but in a nutshell, what does a compensation study all entail? And really we can boil it down to the goal of this project is to make sure that the library is going to be able to attract and retain quality employees so that you can provide those services to the patrons of your organization. And we do that by ensuring that your salaries are going to be competitive with your peer organizations and within the regional market. Now, how we go about doing that looks, there's a lot of different areas that we touch upon. I'm not going to go into some of those key examples this afternoon. I'm actually rather going to just walk you through that as we go through these slides this afternoon. Before I get into the details, there's a couple definitions because I'm going to be tossing out some topics, and I just want to make sure that everyone is on board with this. Plus, then you can take this PowerPoint, and you can use it for future reference as you desire. First that we're going to be talking about is a compensation system, and we'll talk about compensation, and we're going to talk about classification and what really is the difference between the two. A compensation system is the approach that an organization takes to providing the monetary value to employees in exchange for the work that they're performing. And sometimes, most common, everyone thinks about that in terms of those direct wages, and then there might also be some indirect compensation that comes, depending upon the organization. That normally then that system is worked up into a compensation structure or a salary schedule. You have one of those right now. You've got about 9 different pay bands. There are a number of different job titles in each of those pay bands, and there's a defined minimum and maximum to that. So when I talk about your structure, that's what I'm talking about. And then we also have your classification system, and that's a little bit different than your compensation system. Your classification system is the series of job titles that you have. Right now, you have assistants and specialists and librarians and supervisors and managers and coordinators on and on and on. And what we're going to do is we'll look at that, and we will give you some recommendations on some updates to perhaps better clarify the role of positions It's not our role to change your organizational structure. That's not what we're here to do, but perhaps to give better definition to what the positions are responsible to do as we put them on the salary schedule. So when we come back in final form, we're going to have a compensation and classification system for you. I will say that we are not going to talk about benefits today, even though it was on my title chart. The project does include benefits, but we are really at this point just focusing on the comp and class portion of it. The benefits really is the last thing that we tie together, but that will be provided to you in the final report that's going to be coming in about a month. So what have we been doing the last couple of months? Well, we've actually been working pretty hard and we've been very busy. A couple of months ago, we met with your library director, the assistant director and business manager, and then your library managers to get an understanding of the programs and services that are provided within the library organization. You have multiple different branches, and it's really important for us to understand, is a circulation specialist, as an example, the same in your various organizations or your various locations. And so we literally went through every position and who is responsible for what. We also have looked at a lot of your data, your compensation system, your job descriptions, and your current policies. And in addition to that, we have asked for the employees to provide us additional information about their positions. Sometimes job descriptions are not clear, they might be outdated, and we wanted to make sure that we had a real good understanding of the various positions across your organization, because we wanted to just identify, is every branch using everyone in the same way? We have found that perhaps there's a little bit of variation involved, and we're going to have to work through that in the classification process. How we do that, or how we decipher that information, is with a position questionnaire document. And this is a form that we asked the employees to complete, gave us much more information about the responsibilities of their position. And then we asked the supervisors to review those, simply to make sure that employees didn't forget anything, and if there was any clarifying information that was needed. And the last thing that we've done now is we've gone out and we've collected compensation data from other public organizations. I will say that, you know, at this point with the market the way that it is, and it really doesn't matter where you live, there's also a private sector element to that, where we need to understand, you know, really what are some of these positions paying, because, you know, an individual has an option to go work at a, you know, local grocery store, a local business office, or they can decide that they're going to come work for the community library network. And so we have to have an understanding of that. The data that I'm going to show you is based upon the comparables that we identified at the beginning of the project, and those are listed here on the screen. They are public sector in nature, but we have been doing some side research on what's happening in the private sector. So this is a list of the comparables that we've used. They are public in nature, and you will see that most of them are libraries, but there are some other public organizations that at the city level, because you do have finance, IT, and general administration type positions all throughout your organization, along with those other organizations. And so we didn't necessarily limit it to libraries. That helped us really gain an understanding of what's going on within your region. We did have some that did not respond. I'm not necessarily worried about that. We got a good response to get a good understanding of that regional market. I will say that one of the challenges that are going to percolate when we are talking through the recommendations here in another month is what's happening across the border. You're very, very close to the state of Washington, and you are probably well aware then that the state has released their new minimum wage. And although that doesn't necessarily impact legally what anyone within the state of Idaho has to pay, you're just very, very close. And so, I want to point out that we do have some Washington comparables on there, and we are going to be having to talk about, what's going to happen with that minimum wage, because now suddenly, anyone who is in Idaho can just drive a very short distance and be paid significantly more money because their laws require that to be so. And I do think that that's going to have an impact on what happens, at least on the bordering communities within Idaho, and you are not going to be any exception to that. As I've looked over your salary schedule, there's a couple of items that I quickly identified that I think are worthy of discussion, and a lot of this is all going to be in your final report. It's really to kind of give you a preface of what's to come. The first thing is that your salary schedule was developed internally more than 10 years ago. There's very little information left, very few individuals who are very well knowledged in how that was structured to know what methodology was used to build the schedule, along with how they aligned it to the external market. For example, I asked the question, do you know what your average market rate is within these salary ranges? And no one could really affirmatively answer that question. So those ranges, no one knows how they were developed. And that's going to be really meaningful when you see the salary, the market findings here in a couple of slides, because that issue certainly is percolating to the top. The other area of concern I will have is that there are some salary ranges on your compensation system that are really quite broad. There are some that are narrow at 30%, which is completely fine and very reasonable, but there are others that have upwards of about 87% between the minimum and their maximum. And those very broad ranges sometimes can be a little bit challenging because you don't know where your market point is within that, nor how long it's really going to take an employee to get to a competitive rate within that. Those types of broad ranges that we see normally will come with a salary schedule that's broad, what we call broad banded. And yours is not necessarily one of them. We see those maybe in some larger organizations. But there's been a pretty sizable shift in compensation here over the last couple of years, because what's happening is the market keeps pushing these minimums up, right? And that's where you have to capture your recruitment, right? And hope that you are going to be able to retain them from that point. So as you're pushing your wages up, what's happening is that organizations, they're a little bit reluctant to push those maximums up too high because they don't want it to be, they don't want to, be too high over the market where it becomes an unaffordable or an unsustainable plan. So what we're starting to see is that the structures themselves are just starting to shrink a little bit. So it's more common for us to see salary ranges that are between 30 and 50%. Really, we're not seeing much over 50% anymore. That's simply just not the case in the current market. And you haven't been regularly adjusting your schedule, so it's not going to be, I'm going to kind of preface this by saying, your market rates are not, you are not necessarily aligned to the market, and that's because there's been inconsistent salary adjustments on that structure over the course of years. Before we get started, and I'm going to skip over this, we're going to cover this in the final report just because I want to be cognizant of your time here this afternoon. But before I get into the market findings, I do want to talk with you about the employee demographics. What we do is we analyze all of the external market data, and then when we're done with that, then I take a look at what the employee demographics look like. And in this case, I want to give you a preface of here's what your employee demographics are so that you keep that in mind when you're looking at my market findings. And there's a couple of items within this that were really quite startling to me. And the first one here, this is your employee demographics. This is all of your employees, and in this top chart here, everyone has been put into an age band, and based upon that age band, this is the average years of service. Now, what we find nationwide, the Bureau of Labor Statistics maintains this data on a biannual basis, and they just released this information in September of 2022. What we are finding is that organizations they're maintaining about a 6-year, just shy of 6 years, average tenure in the public sector. However, when we looked at your tenure, we found it only to be at about 3.9%. I find that to be a little bit unusual. We tend to see a little bit more tenure in library systems because there are, some individuals that, they seek out library science. That's where they want to work, and they tend to, when they get there, they tend to want to stay there. And, so that certainly was my first concern here. The second concern that I have is what's happening on the bottom part of this chart here. And this is, again, this is all of your employees by age group, but what percentage of employees do you have? You've got a really nice broad range of age here, and that's very good. I think that for every organization, you need to have that. Even though your most tenured people here are in their 60s, they also are those individuals that, you don't have very many of them. You've got about 11% of them that are over, standard retirement age. And so they're coming back and they're working a second job. And so that's really good. But what I'm really kind of worried about here is what's happening on the lower part of this grid here. And the individuals who are under the age of 40, right now, they make up about 40% of your workforce. That's actually relatively common right now. That's pretty standard. What is concerning, though, is that their tenure here is very, very low. And that led me to want to dive into your tenure just a little bit more. And so that is what I did here on this chart. What this chart is showing me is that you have about 28% of your workforce that are in, right as of, this was based upon the initial employee roster that we had at the onset of the project. 28% of your employees are within their first year of employment. And you can see here that your tenure, it's dropping as the years of service progress. So you, in essence, only have about 14% of your workforce that has been there for at least 10 years. And so what that tells me is that you're losing people relatively quickly. They're not staying. And that could also be that you can't hire individuals either. And you don't see that necessarily on this chart. So when I did this, I asked Amy to provide me with just a listing of the turnover. I haven't been able to calculate that into a graph for you this afternoon. It should be in the final report, but it was really astounding how many employees the organization has lost over the last couple of years. I can't tell you why they left. Certainly I cannot speak to the culture. I cannot speak to anything, but I can speak on the wages. And, certainly we want to make sure that your wages are market competitive, because there is a significant cost to your organization when you have turnover, and it isn't necessarily going to come in the form of overtime, but it is going to come with recruitment costs and training costs. And, organizations that just aren't necessarily fully staffed. And so sometimes there's some unintended consequence that comes with that. And so we do want to pay attention to that. And I think when you look at the salary market findings, then this is probably all going to make a much clearer picture to you of some of the challenges that your organization is facing right now. I will also say that in terms of succession planning, there are some inherent challenges here, because if time in service, time in a position, time in the library is meaningful, and in most cases it is, you don't have people there long enough to really grow and develop them up into the next generation of your workforce. And that requires you then to hire from the outside. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's very positive. But then you need to make sure that you have a meaningful compensation system that's going to want to draw people in and is going to want to, they're going to want to work for you. Because, certainly I understand that it's not always about the money, and people come work for organizations for a lot of different reasons. But right now, money is the number one driver for individuals who are choosing employment. It's with the market the way that it is, with the economy the way that is, wages is definitely number one. So with that, let's talk a little bit. Let me show you what I found with my market analysis. And again, let me define what it is that you're going to see here so that the charts make a little bit of sense to you. When we do our market analysis, what we do is we compare the community library network salaries against the aggregate of all of those other comparables that were listed. We do a statistical analysis and then we boil it down into a couple of different numbers. And we give you what's called a comp ratio. It's a comparison ratio between the community library network and the rest of those other organizations. And what we like to see is a number closer to 50%. That comp ratio at 50% means that the community library network is paying really to average or really close to what your comparators are paying. And, we give you a plus minus of that because we always know that there's going to be some fluctuation in the market. We say generally that those comp ratios really need to be between 40% and 60% in order for them to be healthy wages. But there are some positions where, given the market conditions, 40 to 44% may be too low. It sometimes depends on the industry. It a lot of times depends upon the geography. And so because of that, you're going to see that I have those identified and we consider those at risk that they may not be market competitive or they may not be market competitive much longer. So let's take a look at what we found. What this chart shows you is the community library network's minimum rates or hiring rates in comparisons to those other organizations. And what we found was that 75% of your positions have a comp ratio of 39% or less, which means they just simply are too far away from the average market in order to be competitive anymore. You've got about 25% that are doing okay, but you have that 10% where they may or may not be market competitive depending upon the position. So what this identifies then is your hiring rates. They simply are too low. The organization is likely making requests to hire in a little bit higher than the minimum. But again, I think it really at this point is depending upon the positions. The next thing that we look at then is your midpoint, and you don't actually identify the midpoint. So what we did was we calculated it. It's an exact identical midpoint from your minimum to your maximum so that we could compare that against the other midpoints within the market. Now, this looks a lot better, and you will see that only 40% of your positions are under the market and have a comp ratio of less than 40%. You do have a number of them, 20%, that really are on that bubble where they may or may not be competitive much longer. But this, when I first look at it, it looks good. But then what I want to do is I want to remind you of that spread that I was talking to you about. If this is, if the positions are in a 30% spread, this doesn't look so bad. But if you have positions that are within those large spreads that you have, there really is no telling where the market is within that salary range or how long an employee needs to progress through that range before they're at a competitive wage. And so because of that, my recommendation simply is going to be that your entire model is going to have to be redone. We're going to have to scrap it and start over simply because we just can't even necessarily agree on what that market rate per each of your ranges really is, or what we expect it to be based upon your current numbers. But the last one that I want to talk with you about is what we would consider the most reflective of your current market. It takes your existing employee wages and it compares them against the existing employee wages in those other organizations. And this is oftentimes we have salary ranges. We've analyzed those salary ranges, but sometimes maybe salary ranges don't necessarily tell you the whole story. And you might have organizations that pay higher or lower than that. And so the incumbent wages really are the reflection of what your current market is. So overall, what we found by analyzing existing wages is that 55% of your positions are paid a little bit too low. They are under that comp ratio of 40%. You've got another 15% that are in that comp ratio, that really is on the bubble. And then you've got about 30% that are doing okay. The frequency of salary adjustments, or the frequency in which they can progress through that range, along with their tenure, plays a pretty big factor in this. And so, I would say when I first looked at this, I was saying, all right, well, okay, the majority of positions are a little bit too low, but you likely have some people who have been here for a while and they have progressed their way through. In essence, with your tenure, what we're finding that is, probably not necessarily exact. And so that would be an indication to me that, the organization is trying to do some things internally to push some wages up, to get people a little bit higher in their salary ranges so that you can be a little bit more competitive against your external market. So that is what we've been working on for the last couple of months. And I met with your library director a handful of weeks ago, and I introduced all of this information to her so that she's aware of that. And what I've done now, what we've been doing now for the last several weeks, is we started to construct your new salary schedule. We had a long conversation about the type of different models that are out there and available and what's going to work best for the organization. And we focused on two different types of models. The first one being a step model and the second one being a range model. A range model is what you currently have. You have a minimum and a maximum, and there's some fluidity and flexibility with how an employee is going to be able to progress through that range. It gives you it gives you as an organization some flexibility, because maybe one year you can financially afford a generous increase and the next year you might not be able to do that. It doesn't bind you to a rigid structure like a step model does. When I met with your library directors, your managers, at the onset of the project, we talked a little bit about range model versus step model. And I think that there were a number of individuals that were a little bit intrigued by the step model, because that really it's much more structured. Employees can see the pathway that they might be taking over the course of the next several years, and there's some value in that. But the challenge with that is that it's really structured. It's very, very structured, and you're forced into paying the individuals that on an annual basis. And so if you can't necessarily afford to maintain that, it becomes a little bit too troublesome. So given that this is a major overhaul for you, and given that, you were under some new leadership with your library, and I really truly feel that your leadership is taking your organization in a really good direction, that you need that flexibility so that you can continue to talk about performance programs. And if you're having a challenging financial year, that you can work with those ebbs and flows. So what you are going to see in another month here, when you get my recommendations, you are going to be seeing a range model, and you might have some questions on that. Maybe a little bit more discussion of why we chose that, but just know that that will be one of the recommendations that we have coming forward. The last item to talk about here, before I turn it over to some questions here, is compensation philosophy. Apologize, I'm getting a little dry. And one of my recommendations to the organization is going to be to set your compensation philosophy going forward. We're going to build this new structure for you, and it will be up to the organization to maintain it going forward. But with a compensation philosophy, then this is going to help your administration have a policy to help guide them, to bring recommendations forward to you to help manage this new model. A compensation philosophy is the organization's commitment of compensation to its employees. And the goal then of your compensation is to be able to motivate your employees along with retaining them and recruiting them. It's basically a policy. It says that we as an organization want to pay our employees in the manner of X, Y, Z. And then in the future years, your library director and your leadership will be able to say, in order for us to be able to meet this policy, this is what we need to do to maintain the schedule going forward. Organizations really have three options in order to select what their compensation philosophy is going to be. It's very simple. You can either be a leader of compensation and say that we are going to set the market, and all other organizations are going to try to catch us and compete with us. There are, these are what we would consider the big employers on the block that really are setting that market. I don't necessarily see your organization as being the establishing the market and being the leader, but I do hope that the organization will consider perhaps the second alignment, which is just being average to market. And that means that you are going to pay more than some and you're going to pay less than some, and that we hope that by being somewhere in the middle of the pack, you will at least have a seat at the table and be competitive to those individuals who are considering the CLN as an employer. The last option that you've got is to not be market competitive, and normally that happens because there's some financial considerations. And an example of that is going to be the city of Flint, Michigan. Has absolutely nothing to do with you, but is a nationwide, everyone heard about the community and the water crisis that they were in, and they are one of our clients, and they had to go back to the unions with concessions because they simply couldn't afford the wages anymore given what was happening within the organization. So there was a true financial crisis that was occurring, and as a result, they needed to amend what their compensation philosophy was going to be. I will say that, down the road, if the organization identifies that they are going to be an organization that cannot match the market, that you're still going to be expending the costs. You're simply not going to be expending the costs in terms of the salary schedule. You're going to be expending it in recruitment costs and turnover costs and retraining opportunities. And, maybe someone has to go get additional education and training in order to hold those other positions. So normally what we find is that organizations that don't take on an average market philosophy are still spending the money. They're just spending it in different line items. So just know that that's going to be coming back to you in another month, and I'll have a recommendation on where I feel the organization should be in order to be market competitive going forward. So what are my next steps? Right now, I am in the middle of rebuilding your compensation system, and that is a range model. I am also in the process of building a cost estimate for that. I will be meeting with library administration very soon to go over those recommendations and allow a little bit of time to digest before we put things into final form, and then I present those to you. The goal is that we're going to try to meet your November meeting, and I'm assuming that I'm going to be on Zoom again for that. So, we've got a lot of work to do between now and then, along with at that point, then we can start talking about what my findings were of benefits in the market. So that is a high level overview, a whole lot of information. I'm a fast talker. I apologize for that. That's my mother says that's my Norwegian heritage, and so I apologize. But do you have any questions?
Question? Yeah, I was. Oh, sorry. I thought that you were recommending the step model.
Actually, Vanessa, just turn off your mic.
Oh, okay. Is this better?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I thought you were recommending the step model, but that last slide you just showed, it said to rebuild the range model.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, the range model is the model that we're going with. And I'm sorry if I misspoke. Yes, the range model is the model of choice for you. It's going to provide you with the best level of flexibility financially. It's also going to allow you to be able to, have meaningful performance programs where, a step model, you still should have adequate performance, but it's normally you're either meeting the expectation and you get the step, or you're not meeting the expectation and you don't get the step. But more importantly, it really is how you're going to manage the model going forward, because we'll have some recommendations on what you do with the model itself to maintain it against the market, so that you don't have to expend dollars, at a significant amount in future years. The step model, what you will financially expect is that model has to be adjusted on an annual basis to accommodate for the external market. And then employees get a salary increase. They get that step adjustment, okay? And you are held as an organization to the percentage step that I've created for you, regardless if you can afford it or not. And so oftentimes organizations will do smaller percentage steps so that they can afford it, but then it takes employees significantly longer to get to, again, to competitive wages. And so if you can't afford some large salary adjustments, the step model is not necessarily going to be the model for you. It's the most expensive to maintain. So for that reason, well, there's a couple of other reasons too. One of which is knowing that your ranges, you should expect that your ranges are going to be, significantly changed. We're going to be elevating those minimums at a pretty steep amount. The range model is going to give you the best financial flexibility for the next several years.
Thank you. Anything else, Judy? I understand this is a PowerPoint that could be shared with us more than just now.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I will make sure that Amy gets this, and so there's nothing confidential about it.
Well, this absorption process, I need more time than just it, and frankly, can't see all the print that's there, so we need to get it from Amy when you can. Thank you. Which is in anticipation of another materials that you'll be providing before the actual board meeting in November 15th, I think it is. Okay, thank you. It's very helpful to me because it's good information. What we do with it will be the biggest challenge. And I'm glad to have some recommendations and ideas from you on how do we get from where we are to where we want to be, need to be, and should be.
Absolutely. It will be my pleasure to do so.
I don't have a question. I don't know where the speaker is. Oh, okay. So I'm right next to it. Sorry that we're disembodied voices to you. This has been on the radar of this board for many years. So I don't necessarily have a question, but I do have just a couple of comments, which is under Idaho Code. It is our job as the board to establish compensation packages. And we ran into quite a bit of friction with prior administration when we were trying to really dive into this issue. And it was a huge concern of ours when we conducted our director search and hired a director. And so I just want to give kudos to Amy for hiring your entity, because this is long overdue and significantly needed. And I don't think those of us that have been here a while are at all surprised to learn how under market some of our positions likely are. So anyway, thank you. Looking forward to seeing more from you.
Excellent. Thank you.
And what you saw, I think, demonstrates what we've been living with last couple of years, a high transition rate. We knew it wasn't good for the library. Now we need to figure out how to make it better for the library, and having some constructive comments direction from you all will be helpful, because we're going to pay the price for having been so far behind. We scurry along now. Some graduated process to help us get there is what I'll be looking for.
Excellent. Okay.
Hey, thank you so much, Malayna.
You're very welcome. Okay, now I have to stop sharing. All right. I appreciate your time this evening. And Amy, I will talk with you later this week. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Must be back east.
Where are they from?
She's Wisconsin.
Oh, we're not too bad.
Wisconsin.
That's why I think about Flint. Okay.
Well, Flint?
National blood.
Okay. Anything that comments we want to make? But fairly quickly, Katie Brereton has been very patient. She will be our next. Anything we want to say about this right now, or would we wait till next, our meeting in November?
Will we be able to do it in one meeting in November? Thinking about what we need to do once we get this information. It's a lot to think through and to begin to strategize about. Over the next couple of months, or well, I've talked about now budgeting for next year.
Well, what I do think is that as we get the information, it will indicate to us where we go next. Certainly, we know what we need to do. She needs to finish her study and give us what the recommendations are, and then I think it will be clear. But we may not be able to see that far ahead right this minute.
Again, kudos to the administrative team we have now that finally got us quit kicking the can down the road, and now we're getting kicked by it. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Is that good for everybody? Then,
Do we
oh, I'm sorry.
seem to have skipped the director's report?
No, I did
No, she did it.
Okay.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is First Amendment and library overviews with our attorney, Katie Brereton, and what we should do is introduce ourselves first.
Katie.
I'm Shelby Lee, treasurer.
You are, I think you've heard us before, Judy Meyer from the Hayden Lake area, and I'm not an old, but a long-term board member.
Vanessa Robinson, a young. I mean, short term.
Great, I got you.
This is, I'm Katie Blake. I'm not only long-term, but I'm old.
Tina McCree.
Well, nice to meet you all, and thank you so much for doing those introductions. I will introduce myself to you as well. So I am the attorney for the library. I work for a firm in Coeur d'Alene called.
Can you use your mic?
Okay.
There we go. That'd be perfect. Thank you.
I work for a firm in Coeur d'Alene called Lake City Law Group. My practice area is largely focused on public entities and municipalities. And I have a couple of roles in that as an attorney. I advise public entities in this forum where I'm the attorney for the public entity. And so I'm obviously the attorney for the library. One of my partners and I, we are the city attorneys for the city of Hayden. And I also work with another library. And then in another hat that I wear is that I litigation counsel when public entities in the northern 5 counties find themselves embroiled in litigation for a number of things. So the types of cases that I handle range from officer involved shootings to First Amendment issues with school boards. I have also handled Second Amendment cases. So the range of cases that I handle when it comes to public entities is fairly broad. And then I also, and this is another way that I've had experience with this library particularly, is that as part of the work that I do as litigation counsel, and I should clarify that I'm litigation counsel for public entities through their policies with ICRIM. And so ICRIM has throughout the state what is called a defense panel, and myself and one of my partners are part of that defense panel. And so I'm sure that you all know that as part of your ICRIM policy, that there is a provision in there for assistance with employment matters. And so I assist insureds throughout the state with employment matters when it comes to just what I like to call sticky issues. And so I help them kind of figure those out. And I do that before you are even involved in any litigation at all. And so that's the purpose of my coming in, is to assist with preventing litigation if we can. And so I Prior to Amy, I worked with John Hartung and with Rebecca Mountain frequently. And I also have done some training for, I shouldn't say frequently, it's not like you're a frequent flyer or anything, just, you know, I should say, they were really good in utilizing their iPrint policy and in recognizing when there were situations that they just needed some additional assistance with. And then I've also provided some training for employees of the library as well. So with all of that, I have been working with Amy for the past couple of months. As I'm sure you all know, Caitlin Kling was your former general counsel, and she was with our firm. And then when she left to go in-house counsel at another place, she asked me to take over this account because I had had experience with the library before and everything. So in working with Amy, we've talked about some issues that your library has been encountering, and that which I'm sure you're aware that other libraries in Idaho, North Idaho, and across the country have been encountering as well. And these are things that pertain to the First Amendment. And you know, we as citizens, we all value these First Amendment rights. And what I really hope to be able to talk with you about today, and what I do hope that this is more discussion, which is why I'm not at the podium. I really feel like a roundtable is a little bit more easier to have a discussion and everything. But what I really want to talk to you about is some key principles that that apply to particularly libraries, and that are derived from those values and the principles that our courts have said this is what is going to shape the analysis when a court case does come before it that deals with a library. So I just want to kind of start like a broad range, and then we'll kind of narrow it down. So I've made some notes for myself, and I hope that you don't dock me points for reading from my notes or anything. It's just because this is just how I operate. So as you all know, the First Amendment fosters an individual's self-expression, and it also affords the public access to discussion, to debate, and to the dissemination of information and ideas. And the Constitution protects the right of the people to not only disseminate information, but to receive information and ideas. And this right to receive is a necessary corollary and a predicate to the recipient's meaningful exercise of their right of speech and press and political freedom. So we can understand that that means that, you know, as part of the right that we have to speak freely and the right that we have to disseminate information, well, where do we get that information? It's part of receiving that information from someone else. And so what the courts have said is that a state, the government, a public entity, and those are all, you know, terms that we use, and courts are going to just generally use the term state, but the state cannot, consistent with the principles of the First Amendment, contract and this is from what courts have said, cannot contract the spectrum of available knowledge. And so a fixed star of our nation's constitutional constellation is that public officials cannot prescribe what shall be, and I'm quoting from cases here, orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters that are subject to opinion. And so the Supreme Court has recognized that public libraries are designed for freewheeling inquiry. And I really like that term, freewheeling inquiry, because that is actually from one of the hallmark cases that applies to public libraries. And it actually came from the justice in that case who did not agree with the majority opinion. So even he was able to recognize that libraries are designed for this freewheeling inquiry. And so the courts have recognized that the right to read and to be exposed to not just thoughts and ideas, but to controversial thoughts and language is recognized as a right that is subject to the First Amendment protection. So the purpose of the First Amendment is to preserve an uninhibited marketplace of idea. And the public has the right to suitable access to social, political, aesthetic, moral, and other ideas and experiences. So I know that you're obviously all aware that, and we had, our patrons here today who were very much passionate about their beliefs about materials in the library. And you obviously do still have the material selection policy on your agenda. And I'm not going to get into that because you haven't had a chance to discuss it or anything. But what I do want to impress upon you is in the spectrum of cases that I've looked at with respect to this and that I have researched, the principles are well established, meaning that I'm looking at cases that go as far back as, the 70s when it comes to very specifically dealing with the idea about materials selection in the library. And those principles that those cases are based on go back even further in our court's history. So what we're looking at is that it's not that these are, new ideas that come from the Supreme Court or from the Ninth Circuit or from other courts. It's that these are well established and that they are and well established, meaning that they've been accepted by lots of courts by this point. And so what courts frequently are going to look at when it comes to a challenge to materials that appear in a library, and when it comes to a decision that is made to remove materials from the library, is that they're going to look at what the motivation is of that body. And if the motivation comes from a personal place and it comes from a personal feeling of that is rooted in a political or social beliefs, the government's going to have to meet the highest burden in order to remove that material from the library. And this is because what the courts are going to say is that when we're considering the content of materials that are in the library, and we're taking that into consideration when deciding whether or not that's something that we want to keep or if it's something that we want to remove from the library. The courts have said that public libraries are limited public forums, and in this limited public forum, and with the principles that I was talking about beforehand with respect to the right to read and the right to receive information, the courts are going to say that content-based restrictions on that right to receive information and on that right to read are going to be subject to the highest level of scrutiny that courts have. And so in that situation, if we want to get to the point of saying that, okay, we are going to look at this material and we are going to judge it by its content, what the state, and I'm again just using the term state generally, what the state has to do is say that it meets a compelling governmental interest and that we're using the least restrictive means available to remove that material from our system. And what courts have consistently found is that it is a very difficult burden for a library to meet when it is making those content-based restrictions. And so when we get to that, where it's a difficult burden to meet, and when I say it's a difficult burden to meet, what you can read between the lines is that the court who looked at that case and said, you haven't met this burden, it means that the library then engaged in viewpoint and content-based discrimination, which violates the First Amendment. And so that, as you can imagine, is a very serious thing for a public entity. So what we have to be cognizant of in when we're considering the right of our patrons and the right of the public when they are coming into the library is that we want to make sure that we're following what the principles that the law has said that we should follow. And I think that, you know, there's plenty of ground for interpretation of the law in a lot of cases and in a lot of different contexts. But in the particular realm of the law as it pertains to the First Amendment and the First Amendment as it applies to libraries, I think that there's not going to be, I'm trying to think how to say this. We're not going to see the same sort of surprise overturning of cases like we have recently seen in our judicial system, where there's a body of case law that has been well accepted for a long time, and then we're going to see a court say, well, we're going to change our mind about that. And it's because this is the First Amendment, and it's because that as Americans, we value this right so much because it encompasses so much. And I do not expect that courts will be changing their mind anytime soon about a value that is so sacred to our country. So with that said, I don't have 30 minutes of time of a presentation. So I would really like it if you have questions about any of this, that we can discuss those. And I'm open for any of those types of questions.
Thank you. Oops. Thank you very much. Okay, guys. Do you have questions, concerns, thoughts?
Yes, so our federal and state governments have established that there is a compelling interest for the government to protect children from pornography, and both our state and federal, there are laws that prohibit people from distributing materials that are harmful to minors. So you said that there was many court cases establishing the right to read or whatever. Do any of those actually apply to children?
Yes, they do. That's such a great question. Okay, so I'm going to consult my notes again. So we actually, there's a case that was decided in 2000, and I should say that all the cases that I have found, when I say that they're well established, I'm saying that I'm looking to cases that are from 2000 and beforehand. So there's a case from 2000, and it actually is a case where it was specifically dealing with two books. And one was, and actually all the cases that I found, I specifically looked at them as it pertained to minors and younger children. And it was just because I know what is in, like I said, I know what our patrons are valuing and everything. And so I wanted to make sure that I was very specific in what I was talking about. And so this is a case called Sund versus City of Wichita Falls. And it's one of the cases that addresses books that were written for young children on the subject of having gay and lesbian parents. And in that particular case, the court, and I'll just tell you what the court said. And it said that states absolutely may regulate children's access to materials that are not deemed obscene for adults. However, such regulation is permissible only where the restricted materials meet the stringent tests for obscenity as to children or harmful to minors. And you're right. So I did go ahead and look at our state regulations as it pertains to what it defines as harmful to minors and what it defines as obscenity as it applies to adults. And if there are materials that meet that legislative definition, and if there are materials that that meet the case law definition of what applies to obscenity, then of course, as a library, that's not going to be materials that appear on your shelves. But here's the crux of that, is that if you were to get a challenge, it's not going to be what our individual opinion is of what we think meets that definition of harmful to minors, or excuse me, harmful to minors, or what meets that definition of obscenity. It's going to be a court that says that. And so that's where we do have obviously these laws that we're going to try our best to make sure that we're following and considering when we're making these decisions. But at the same time, if there were to be a challenge, it would ultimately be a court who would decide that. And does that answer your question?
Do you have other court cases?
I do, yeah. And you know what might be helpful is if I can email Amy and she can send those to you, because that way I don't have to sit here and I can give you the actual citations so that you can go find them.
So what we were thinking about putting into the policy, the Idaho Code 18, blah, blah, blah. So you're saying that would have to be decided by a court also? If a book came into the library that violated that, and the board, and Amy, agreed that it violated it, we couldn't make that decision, it would have to go to a court?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. And I do want to clarify. The red section. Okay, yeah.
Considering
that. No. No. And when I say challenge, I mean a very specific litigation challenge. So let's go with the scenario of that. You are presented with some material that maybe someone wants to donate to the library, and you have in your policy, you've got a way to review that, right, Amy? And you make the decision that no, this isn't right for our library, and it's based off of these criteria in the statute, and you say, we think that it meets this definition. There's not going to be a court that says, well, I have to rubber stamp that. You're still very much within what your obligations and your duties are as not only as Amy's obligations and duties in her role, but in the review process that applies for materials and everything. You wouldn't have to get a court approval or anything to do that.
And so why did you say if somebody donated it? Because I'm thinking if the selection policy employees brought it in, I don't know why you specifically said donate.
Oh, just as an example.
Okay,
Yeah.
Because if it's reconsidered across the board. If it's, I mean, when something's donated, who looks at that? Do you look at it differently than?
No, but it was, I mean, so if it's donated, that's more an example because someone else has said, we think the library should have it versus we have a department that every day is using the policy to determine. But the donation still goes through our policy, but it just wasn't selected as the process. So donation would also be something that we would also apply the criteria to, just like we would every day when we're purchasing an item.
All right, thank you.
Over the last several months, at least the last several months, could have been the last year. I don't know. We get inundated with emails and individuals coming to our meetings saying that we should create a separate section for certain materials, or we should keep certain materials behind the counter, or we should come up with a rating system, or we at the very least should put a label on the spine of certain materials, particularly if they're LGBTQ plus related materials, so that patrons are aware that that is what they would be checking out. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that case that I just was talking with you about, they actually did address this very thing about not that the material was completely removed from the library, but that it was taken from the children's section and put into the adult section. And the court actually said that that was an impermissible infringement of First Amendment rights, and saying that, listen, we can't have, and two, you have to, I also want to just make sure I emphasize this as well. In that case, the court determined that the public library in that case had made a content-based, viewpoint-based determination about the materials that were removed from the children's section. And the court said that they did not meet their burden of showing that it was a compelling governmental interest that they had said was their compelling governmental. And so what the library had offered was that, okay, we're not going to offer the materials in the children's section, but we're going to put them into a different adult section. And like I said, the court said that was an impermissible infringement of that First Amendment right, because the court said that it imposed a differential burden on the availability of those materials to those patrons and those children who do want to access those materials. So when we get into manners in which we are imposing a differential burden onto materials because of their content, I do not think that a court, even if it were something different, like you've suggested, Regina, that I don't think a court would look favorably on those types of things because of existing case law that has already said that that's unacceptable.
And along those same lines, don't our members have a right to privacy? And isn't there also a privacy interest in regards to, you know, if we start labeling the spines of books, are we infringing on the privacy interests of our members?
You're correct, and courts have recognized that patrons of libraries have a privacy interest. I'm sure, as you all know as well, that this is solidified in Idaho Code as well with respect to what is considered a public record information about individual patrons and what they check out and what they are selecting at the library or not matters of public record. So your patrons do enjoy those rights to privacy and everything.
Okay, so I'm wondering, you said that the court said that it was an impermissible infringement of rights to have a separate section. What court was that and what was the case?
That was that one that I told you about, the Sun versus City of Wichita. Wichita Falls, I think.
And the second one also?
The
right to privacy?
Oh, I don't have in my notes, and I looked at that, but I didn't put the case in my notes. Just because it was, in my notes, I specifically wanted to make sure that I touched on the materials selection issues. But I can send that to you as well. Yeah.
So is there more than one case that cites that criteria? You know, you're finding one case now, but are there others?
And that maybe help me clarify a little bit. Are you the criteria that you're referencing?
Yeah, impermissible.
Yeah, sure. There's
so it's not just one case suggesting it.
No.
There's some depth to this.
Yes.
And not only within Idaho, apparently.
Yes, and so the U.S. Supreme Court has a case from 1982 that deals with the materials selection. And this is where cases that have come after that, they are all based on the U.S. Supreme Court case. And then even before then, we have cases throughout the country that deal with the issue of material selection in light of our First Amendment principles and everything. So yeah, it's not that there's just one single case out there that that we're looking to. There, it is a body of case law that's been embraced by not just the highest court that we have federally, but that has been embraced also by lower courts across the country.
Could you help us understand even more clearly what is meant by viewpoint discrimination?
Sure. So viewpoint discrimination is when and I'll explain it also in the context of, because you find these two together all the time. It's content-based and then viewpoint. So content-based and viewpoint is when you're considering, and I hate to do this because it's using the term in the definition, but you're considering the content of something when you are making a decision as to whether or not that content is allowed to be spoken, is allowed to be heard. And so we see these in the First Amendment very broadly. We see this in numerous contexts. So it might be that a content and viewpoint based consideration goes to if we're having a parade, what the purpose of the parade is, and saying, well, we either like the purpose of this parade or we don't like the purpose of this parade. And if we're going to that and saying, well, we don't like the purpose of this parade, and because we don't like that, we're going to make a decision that negatively impacts whether or not that parade can happen. So that's one context. Another context may be that in the case of public employment, you may have a public employee who on their own time speaks on matters, let's say about their political affiliation or something like that. And the public employer says, well, I don't really like that you're talking about this specific thing, and then something negative happens to the employee. That is taking into consideration the content and their viewpoint. Let me see if I can, and just in the context of we'll be real specific here in the context of libraries. If we're taking into account and making decisions because of the content of a book. So let's say that we're making decisions that because a book contains religious themes, and because it may discuss religion as it pertains to historical religions in the US and something like that. And if we take that into account and we say, we don't want this book in the library because of its discussion of religions and their histories in the US, that is content and viewpoint considerations. And if you're making a decision to remove that book from the library because of that content, that's an impermissible infringement of the First Amendment. Yeah, does that answer your question?
It's helpful.
I just wanted, you've mentioned ICREMP and how you do work on behalf of ICREMP, and you're probably here in some capacity as a representative of ICREMP, telling us what we should and should not do when it comes to fulfilling our duties as a board. So if this board were to take some sort of action or engraft into our policies principles that go against what you're here telling us we ought not do, can that have greater ramifications to us board members?
Oh, that's a heavy question. So the short answer is yes, there are greater ramifications. So Let's just start on, how am I doing on time? I've got 5 minutes. Okay, so, as succinctly as I can. Obviously, when all of you took, your position and, were sworn in, you took the oath of office. And that's the oath that every public official, who takes, who's elected, in the state of Idaho, that's the same oath that they take. And it's to, support the laws and the Constitution of the United States and the state. And so from that basis, we know that then our public officials have an obligation to follow the laws. And so when there are instances where public officials, it's not, and I want to be really clear, there are times where I'm involved in litigation where someone on the other side says that the public official or the employee, the public employee or something, has violated the law. That doesn't mean that the person who is alleged to have done that knowingly did that, or that they, purposely went out to violate someone's rights, whatever the right alleged is to have been. But when we do have public officials who take action which is not in accordance with what the laws of the United States and what the laws of our state of Idaho say that are permissible, then we do get into situations where there's going to be greater scrutiny from a standpoint of what your policy says with respect to whether those actions fall under something that is covered under your policy of insurance. And this also, this comes into play, obviously, if there's an associated lawsuit with it, right? If we're talking about covered instances under a policy and everything. So when that happens, there could be ramifications from whether it's something that would be covered under the policy, whether or not the defense would be covered under the policy. And then the other ramification too is whether or not as an official you could be held accountable in your personal capacity. So one of the things that Idaho law provides when it comes to tort claims that are filed against public entities is that the public entity has to provide a defense for the official or the employee if they are named in the lawsuit. And what that means is that that person doesn't have to worry about paying for the attorneys out of their own pocket. They don't have to worry that in the event there's a settlement that they pay that out of their own pocket. If it were to go so far as to go to a trial and there would be a judgment that would be entered against the public entity, that person doesn't have to worry about having to pay that out of their own pocket. Unfortunately, if we get to a space where there's been a determination that the actions of the employee or of the public official were beyond what they were legally allowed to do, meaning that they violated the law and they knew that they were doing that, that's when there could be personal implications for that person, meaning that they could end up having to provide their own defense. They could end up having to be on the hook for that. So those are, I have not personally seen in my practice a situation where that has come up, but it is something that is out there.
Other questions?
I do have a quick one, although we may have to stop in a minute and extend our meeting. So, well, actually, why don't I ask for that at this point in time? Because we do have the executive session, which we have to get to. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
you need.
probably 30 minutes.
I move to extend our meeting by 30 minutes.
It's been moved to extend the meeting by 30 minutes. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Then I have a question. We've heard a lot, of concerns from the public, concerning that we have obscenity in the library, that it's pornographic, that it's, but the library is very careful in making sure that the items we have here don't meet that definition by law. So, is there a definition that we can come to, or is there, I mean, how do we, because it's really difficult when the community sees the library as having pornographic materials when we actually do not.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So we know what is contained within our within Idaho Code as to what it defines as obscenity and what it defines as harmful to minors. Sitting here right now, I would be really hesitant to boil that down to something that would be a blanket, where we can say it's either this or it's this, because what we have to do with each item is to consider it on an individual basis. And so you've got to consider the material individually in light of what those criteria are within Idaho Code. And what the courts have said is that if it's not harmful to minors, as that term is defined by the law, and if it's not what is considered to be obscenity for minors, then the library, if it looks through its materials selection policy, and whatever that policy is for the library, and I say library as in all libraries, because they're each going to have their policy. But when it does that, the court is going to say that that the library has upheld its obligations.
I'll follow up on that then is there something that we should have in writing, the judicial rule and description that should be in our policy, so that we all have the criteria that the Idaho Code has set?
Well, I do, and I have your previous policy, and okay, so and then the one that Amy provided is the one that is the revision. So the policy that I'm looking at right now references the particular code sections. And as we know, the Idaho Code is readily available on the legislature's website and everything. So, I mean, I can't tell you either way whether or not you want to print the particular provisions of the code that apply into your policy. I mean, that's a decision for the board to make. I mean, if it would be simpler for the board to do that, maybe that's something that you consider doing. If it's simpler to have the code sections on hand when it comes time for, if there is an occasion where you've got to review either a challenge or something like that, it's I think whatever collectively you decide is best.
What I was trying to do is to think through, as we deal with this, staff and board, if we have it written in front of us, which is what I would need to be sure I'm remembering it correctly, And that the public does, because it's a policy that's meant to be shared, so everybody understands the criteria we're all using. This is just being imposed from us, it's the law in the land. Is it, how many sentences does it take to begin to define that without wearing everybody out?
It takes a lot. It's very lengthy.
Yeah, yeah, the,
So
you know, the
just
particular
below
code
that.
section is, when it comes to the definition of
Right.
what it defines as harmful to minors. I mean, it's not a simple definition. It's not, you know, it is this,
That's what I want, just a 2 or 3 sentences.
I know.
This is what I
If
got.
only they had made it easier.
But I think it reflects the dilemma that everybody had, including the courts, how it is we define it. And so it takes a whole bunch of words and concepts, still subject to interpretation.
Yeah.
But trying to help us as a public agency be fair and responsible with what the law says, but how we can share that responsibility with the patrons who are using the library.
Sure.
It's not just us, it's everybody, taxpayers who funded it and those who use it. Okay, so you don't have an easy answer to that one. Thank you.
I don't, and,
What do other libraries do?
Yeah.
You must be seeing it around the state for ICRIM. So you're insurance.
Okay, we better be careful about, I can see us opening up, what do other libraries do? That's gonna open up, but.
Right, and they don't have an answer for that, but there must be some standard.
It's the code.
Yeah.
That's the standard,
The standard and
For us
also,
now. almost.
okay, all right, I think that we are getting out of time, and so, we can certainly ask Katie back. And, if there are issues, then we can put that on the agenda should we need to.
I want to finish up though with ICRIM. If we don't follow what ICRIM counsels us, at least in NIC experience was, ICRIM said, we don't want to insure you anymore.
that is what ICRIP said.
It's
So
scary.
it is a scary, proposition, and, you know, I'm not privy to everything that went on with that and everything. I know as much as you do, with respect to what was, reported on and everything.
Public knowledge.
Yes,
Yeah.
presumably, what would happen if, an insured had their, coverage, canceled by ICRIP, they would have to find other coverage.
That's been a challenge.
And it's a challenge, yeah. And I think that it's well recognized that it is a challenge. You know, ICRIP insures, I mean, almost every public entity, in Idaho. I think like the city of Boise or the county or Ada County,
Self-insuring.
maybe self-insured. But you should take a look at what their budget is and it's not, it's considerably different than smaller, public entities like libraries. And so when, you know, you're thinking about something like that, that is definitely a consideration that often guides a lot of public entities in consideration of how they make decisions.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Don't they say you have to have a one-armed attorney, so they can't say on this hand you do this and on that hand you do that?
Don't listen to her, okay?
I have never heard that before.
Oh,
That is
no,
very funny.
oh,
Yeah.
no. All right, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time.
Well, I
think-
appreciate being asked to come and discuss this with you, and I'm happy to discuss this more. And I should also tell you this, you also each do not have to wait until we have a meeting to talk individually with. I'm available to discuss with each of you any concerns that you have. If you have questions that you want to talk about, or ideas, or anything like that, and you want to talk with me about that and get my legal advice on those things, you are more than welcome to give me a call or shoot me an email, and we can talk about those things, because I am your attorney and this is what I am here to do. So I know that in this
span of time, I mean, the First Amendment is obviously it's such a huge issue and there are such nuances to it. And I really wanted to boil down the nuances to it. And so I'm sure that even after you leave, you'll still have questions and things that come up. And so if you want to ask questions, we don't have to wait for a meeting to do that. You can each contact me. Just don't contact me two at a time.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay. Moving on, we absolutely must get to our executive session, and so we're going to move to that next.
That means everybody has to leave.
That means, yes, I'm gonna have to ask staff and our guests to leave. Thank you all for coming.
Well, I'm a patron, not a guest. Anyway, is the meeting going to adjourn after the executive session or what are we reconvene?
If it reconvenes, it'll reconvene to adjourn.
Have to be there.
My assumption is that because of the time.
We still have other items on the agenda, don't we?
That's correct. And we do, and the material selection policy will be moved to Monday. And we can talk about trustee continuing education then. That's one of the reasons why we have this meeting on Monday.
Let's confirm on the meeting on Monday, which is a public meeting. Here.
Yeah, it's a special meeting. It's here. It's from 2 to 5.
Agenda topics will be continuation of this.
We'll send you the agenda.
So I just saw public knowledge.
Yeah.
4 hours ahead of time.
Well, but is it a lot of it executive session or no?
Some of it is going to be executive session.
You're welcome. You don't need me for this. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
you very much.
Yep.
To move this along, I will make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 742061B.
Okay. It's moved to go into an executive session, Idaho Code 742061B.